Well, 3-4 minutes, I say. Bit of TikTok good news for once. You know that show from a fortnight ago, Roger, with James the farmer?
Yeah.
I had my appeal granted, so I've downloaded and uploaded that. It's 55 minutes actually. It was on. I didn't realise it was quite as long as that. So I've uploaded that to YouTube this afternoon.
Oh, that's good. That's good. I just got your voicemail about the Filmora thing. I'll just send you the rendered thing. That's
the. I think that's the easiest way. From what I listened to, if you just send me like the project file, yeah, it's going to tell me to try and locate the sources, and obviously I won't have them.
Yeah, no worries. Then I'll just send you the rendered thing, and then you've got that to work with.
Yeah. Yeah, you can. Okay, thank you.
I think it's about 4 minutes long. I think.
Perfect. I literally uploaded last night, so I've done the little intro mentioning the war and stuff like that. So yeah, it's ready for your section, and then we can move on to the next one. But I was thinking as well as whether we'd actually want to be part of it or whether it's just to speak to him for his opinion. But it might be worth having a conversation with John.
Yeah, it could be. Although, he doesn't. I'm not totally sure he goes completely with his father's philosophy, to be honest. But
well, I did kind of. I have, I listened to him on your show before, and obviously I listened to the show earlier, and I have kind of picked up that vibe in the past. But he also seems quite I don't know. Sometimes it seems quite a conflicted opinion because I mean the way that he joined and when he responded to my question, sort of like what his dad would think. I mean the initial response was he wouldn't be very satisfied, and that's exactly what I expected. Was good, wasn't it? Yeah. And then it kind of tailed off. So yeah, it does seem like there's a bit of confliction there.
Yeah, and he ended up with vegans can be too pushy, but of course, well, yeah, it's just a question of. I mean, that's a very subjective thing. I mean, like. Is it too pushy just be stood there at a table, waiting for people to come to you? Some people say yes, some people say no.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I suppose it is. It's all a subjective thing, isn't it? I mean, yeah. I suppose that you've got to take into consideration he's made the point of saying he doesn't feel like he's a preacher. I mean, I definitely don't feel like I'm a preacher. But
no. Yeah,
I wouldn't see myself as a preacher, but I certainly do look to have the conversation as often as possible. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't either. I mean, it's far too religious sounding for me anyway. But it was interesting, wasn't it? Because I think there's nobody on that vegan panel that was particularly religious. I don't think.
No. No, it was an interesting thing. So was that kind of spur of the moment, or
I didn't know about it until yesterday. And one person who was there only knew about it about 2 hours before it started. So
I did get that gist, but no, it was good. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, there was a couple of people into cruising, which was, I mean, it's really bad for the environment. Cruise ships.
Yeah. Well, not. Yeah, I mean, and not to mention, obviously, it doesn't really do the whole. You don't have to be well off or privileged to do these kind of things. It's not from an outside point of view. Talking about that kind of thing is probably seen as a bit, I don't know, high and mighty, I suppose. But absolutely, in terms of the environment, not good.
Well, I think COVID brought all the prices down. I don't know whether they've gone back up again, but I mean, it's a kind of retirement kind of thing, isn't it? People, I'm going to go on a cruise when I retire, that kind of malarkey. So,
yeah, yes, most. I don't think many young people do cruises, do they?
No, it used to be that all the vegan influencers used to go on these vegan cruise ships and give talks and that,
Yeah. But surely it would talk to other vegans.
Yeah, well, they were presumably assuming that they were vegan but not active. I mean, Aspie used to be invited a lot and that kind of stuff. I suppose it was supposed to be inspirational. I suppose.
All right. No, I didn't know too much about that. I wonder whether that's where Aspie got all his fantastic contacts, and his financial gurus in the crypto world.
Yeah, quite possibly, because again, you'd have that kind of person there, I suppose.
I would imagine so. Yeah, he's gone quiet again. Actually, Aspie. I mean, that's not a bad thing, but
no,
he only seems to pop up when he wants a bit of money.
Yeah, there'll be quite a few bankers, and there's quite a few bankers spelt with a W there as well, I suppose. So
yeah, absolutely. But no, but yeah, we'll wait to Kev to join. But I think it's an interesting subject for today. I mean, the two photos that you can't see all that well, purposely made them a little bit subtle so that we could still see the comments underneath. But they actually came from it's a kids soft play center. So nothing to do with anything really, and even they go to the lengths of bringing in these babies to be exploited before, obviously, presumably they're sent off to be killed.
Kevin is just putting James to bed and knocking him out with a good slug of whiskey.
Well, if it's anything like every other day this week, they'll be reading the book and it'll be about 10 minutes.
Yeah, actually, let's speak about your book. It's really good. And of course, it's based on repetition, and children love that, don't they?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, that originally, like, I think I mentioned it before. The original concept that I had was there'd be a couple of books featuring Leon, kind of using the same mantra. And the second one that I wanted to write was about eggs. And I actually kind of drafted a story where actually Leon was with his granddad this time, and they went through the woods, and his granddad explained when they looked at a nest that that's a magpie's eggs. They're not for us. But the problem was, I don't think that would translate when it comes to the likes of chickens and eggs, because everyone has them without taking them, so to speak. It's not like you go and collect them. The act of going into the woods and taking an egg from a nest, say, most people know is wrong, but the idea of buying chickens' eggs from their neighbour's little wooden box at the end of their drive is normality. I don't think it would transfer the way that the milk one did.
Yeah, actually, I've never thought about that before. That's a brilliant point, because they call it stealing birds' eggs, don't they?
Of course, yeah. I mean, when I was a youngster and I was sort of being taught by my granddad and my uncle about different wild birds and things like that, yeah, absolutely. The idea of stealing an egg from a nest was like, you cannot do this, forbidden, worse than setting a fire almost. But yeah, the idea of just walking into, say, a hen house and taking eggs, that's normal for most people. In fact, a lot of people send the kids out to do it. So I don't think the idea would transfer like I wanted it to.
Yes.
Even to the point that, do you remember that case from, was it last year or the year before, where those lads smashed all the swans' eggs? Like, things, there's not the same level of respect, it seems.
No, there was a case of that in Ireland about longer than now, about 7 years ago. Hi, Joanna. Hello.
Hi, Joe. Yeah, sorry. Hi, everyone that's joined. I haven't been paying too much attention.
It's James' favourite. That's whiskey, I think. He's on his third dram right now.
But yeah, that's basically what I got. I got to the concept with the eggs book, and I realized this isn't going to transfer in the simple way that the milk did, because obviously when it comes to milk, 99% of people don't have any concept of getting milk for themselves, whereas eggs, they may well do. A lot of people have backyard eggs now.
Have you ever used that Doodle app thing, which kind of does that hand thing? It draws. Could you like do a version of the book that way?
I've not heard of it. Tell me more about it. What? So it kind of
it's all very black and white, but you've got an actual hand with a pencil, actually drawing and writing. So it'll draw the picture and write the slogans there and then. It's very kind of quick. I'm sure Joanna will know all about it. It's
it's not something I've known about, but definitely sounds interesting. It might make my life much easier, because I mean, the issue that I've potentially got is the illustrator that did the first book. That was a friend of my dad's. I wouldn't really want to use the same person again, but just because of the money involved, and because I'd rather not. I'd rather like build someone up that was an up and coming illustrator or something like that. But the issue is, obviously, then they wouldn't match exactly. Everyone's got their own style.
Yeah, I don't know how this works. I know Gareth Francione's got one, I think, and I think
look at it.
Yeah, the old grumpy vegans. It's funny. There's so many people who call themselves grumpy vegan. It was mentioned today because somebody asked me if I knew Kim Stallwood, but I think that was before we went on the air, and he's called himself the grumpy vegan for years. Then you got grumpy vegan granddad. Yeah. And you've got the grumpy vegans. They're in Ireland. And then there's some cranky vegan, of course.
So. Cranky, yeah. Well, I'm sure I don't know if they're a YouTuber, but there's definitely a Twitch streamer that's called the Miserable Vegan as well.
Oh, great.
Yeah. She's a female that plays like games, but yeah, she's the miserable vegan. She's not. I think it's just like a, she's actually like a Laura kind of personality, so the opposite of miserable. But
Yeah.
it's just
But we ought to have titles like the vegan with no sense of humor and all those.
Yeah. Well, I think that's exactly what it is. I think it is that play on those words exactly. Hi, Jennifer. Welcome, Kev. I'm assuming. Well, that's quick. Whiskey does work, hey.
It was the mallet that did it.
I wasn't expecting you as fast as that. Capybara. That's Max's favourite animal, a capybara. I was watching a little short clip actually about capybara. I can't think where it was in America, but I'm sure they tried to select some gated community or some sort of thing, and they kind of moved all the wildlife off to create this, and then they just basically came back and they were protected, and so they're basically stuck there. So you've got all these really expensive, lavish houses that are kind of being invaded by capybara walking through the streets or resident on their front lawns and things, and they cannot do a thing about it. Which is a little tiny bit of decency for once, although it didn't work the way they wanted to. It's not worked out that way. But yeah, it's nice to sometimes see little bits of positivity like that. A little bit of nature reclaiming what was always theirs.
Yeah, it kind of feeds into that idea about humanity in a vegan world would be much more humble, and so therefore that type of thing would happen much more, wouldn't it? In the sense that, oh, we're encroaching here, we better not do that, and that kind of stuff.
Yep. Well, this is one of the key points that always doesn't get taken into consideration when we have this conversation about whether it's invasive species or whether it's about land or any of these different things, and whether it's about conservation. All of these things never really take into consideration, but you know that they used to have X amount of space and now that space is tiny, right?
Yeah.
You need to take this into consideration, our contributions to all of this, and that's for the most part ignored, deflected away from.
Here's our first talking point then, Andy. Badgers shouldn't be protected, says Kerry. And I presume that's something to do with TB and cows, I suppose.
Well, I mean, I suppose at its simplest point, I would agree. I'd love to live in a world where we don't need to protect certain species of animal. That's just the natural way of things. But we don't. We live in a very violent and horrible world. So it's a shame that protection doesn't extend to all. But it's also a shame that protection isn't even adhered to.
Yeah, they dig up their fields. So, Kerry, just consider this. Perhaps the badgers were there before you were, so that means you've taken over their field.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, even if you want to forget that part for a second, I'm sure, Kerry, that you've heard at some point in your life the idea of two wrongs don't make a right. So how does they digging up your field make it okay to go and dig up their sets?
Also, what does it mean digging up? I mean, like normally, I don't think they create big holes in the middle of fields, do they? I mean, they're more like use a little bit of woodland and stuff to create a burrow and things.
I can remember from the window cleaning days, some of the bigger gardens would have like big stretch, like not big actually, like there'd be small patches of turf that had almost been like stripped off, but they weren't holes. It was almost like grass damage.
I love that line. I remember from my window cleaning days.
But yeah, I mean, there were a lot of our customers, because we didn't do a lot of it was all residential for the most part, but we didn't do like cul-de-sacs and things like that. I mean, quite a few of our customers were like smaller scale celebrities. So we were talking like people that had huge plots of land, sometimes 4 or 5 acres as their back garden. So you'd have quite a lot of these people that would whinge about like badgers pulling up the turf, but I don't remember them ever digging holes. It would normally be like they'd scratch the surface of the grass.
Have you ever seen that terrible 1970s soft porn film called Confessions of a Window Cleaner?
Yes. In fact, pretty much for many years when I used to go out and like for a drink and things like that, and you tell someone you was a window cleaner, that would always be the first thing they'd ask. They go, "Oh, I bet you've seen some things." I'm like, nothing like what that film sort of like alludes it to be. No, absolutely not. Nothing you'd want to see, basically, for the most part.
Evening, by the way, guys. Sorry I was late.
Hi, Ken.
No worries. How you doing? But I think I was 25 or 26 before the first time I ever saw a badger. I mean live. I'd seen plenty on the side of the road, sadly, but before I'd actually seen a badger in the flesh, so to speak, yeah, I think I was 25 or 26, which is crazy when you think about it, considering how rampant apparently they are and such a surge of a problem that it took me 26 years before I even encountered one.
You were looking in the wrong direction.
I mean, I'd seen plenty, like I say, on the side of the road, but I'd never seen one live, and that was the first time. And I think I've only come across two since then.
Yeah, they tend to be a bit smaller than people expect.
Actually, much smaller than what kind of I suppose my concept of a badger was built up as a child from like the Animals of Farthing Wood, where badger was the biggest character, and actually that's not really the case. Sometimes when you see them in the sort of real, they're nowhere near as big as what you think, and they're certainly nowhere near as ferocious as kind of what people try to make out either.
Kerry says she's played tag with a badger before.
I've been chased by one before. Okay. Well, that sounds far more pleasant than the idea of killing them, right? Tag.
The question is what?
Yeah, I agree.
So do I. Yeah, you're quite right. Right, I'm just going to step away for a second to service some needs.
No worries. But yeah, so I suppose our topic of conversation for this evening, since it is Easter, although I don't really like to buy into that Easter term, is essentially Easter exploitation. It seems to be not just in England, obviously, it's a worldwide thing, but these traditional or cultural events that we kind of feel obliged to celebrate, regardless of what the actual meaning is behind them, are always riddled with extra exploitation, as though the amount that goes on in our daily lives isn't quite enough. And so we have to sort of, we've got an event, let's make sure that we exploit even more lives for it.
Yeah. And I suppose it's a one that it almost touches on kind of all parts of veganism to a point, doesn't it? So you've got obviously the food element. So Friday we exploit sea life. Sunday we usually exploit baby sheep. The run up to it, we exploit various different animals for entertainment traditionally. So that might be lambs, it might be chicks, like baby chickens, or it could be any host of like rabbits and that sort of thing.
Yeah, are often used, yeah.
And then you tend to find that people get animals bought for them that then a lot of them end up in like rehoming centers. So it's like, and then you get a lot of new clothes bought this time of year. And again, if that's got leather or animal skin of any description on there, that's another thing as well. So it's almost like a round circle, isn't it? It's almost like,
I mean, and the one, like the other part of is obviously the amount of chocolate too.
Yeah, huge amount. I mean, we've obviously, I don't buy an Easter thing. My ma's banging Easter. She always complains I never get her an Easter card. It's like, well, one, I don't do iCard, yeah. It's like, one, I don't do cards, and two, I don't do Easter. But we get the boys' eggs and stuff just so they don't feel left out more than anything, to be honest with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, I totally.
But I mean, it's when it comes to the plant-based stuff, like the free-from stuff or whatever, you've got to get it early because there's never enough of it.
No, I've noticed that year on year, and to be fair, I noticed it really bad in the lead up to Christmas this year with the Advent calendars. I've never had a problem before getting one, and I actually did this year. But that's a positive thing too, I suppose. It means there's more demand than there is a supply.
Yeah. Agree.
But yeah, absolutely. It seems. I mean, Easter it's probably the second worst now after Christmas.
And it's probably. I mean, if you think about it, apart from the gifting side of things, right? It's probably almost as bad because we probably consume as much chocolate and dairy this time of year as we do at Christmas. We have the big feasts and the big meals that are all centered around animal exploitation. And then the animal exploitation. So at Christmas, it's just different animals getting exploited for entertainment. So it's reindeers and camels.
I suppose the only difference of Easter is that the build-up doesn't go on for quite as long. But I suppose now in terms of anything else, it probably is as big as Christmas.
Yeah, I suppose the Easter Sunday is probably as big as Christmas Day when it comes to the level of animal exploitation that's involved.
Yeah,
And
because
like I
the
say,
thing
it's
is,
just
I suppose it's very much like Christmas now. I'm guessing your mum's not religious.
no,
So yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's getting to the point now. I mean, when I was younger a bit, there was like you either did celebrate Easter or you didn't, whereas everyone celebrated Christmas. Whereas now everyone celebrates
yeah,
Easter too, like for the most part. I mean, it's just a
yeah,
normal weekend to me, but
yeah,
to
it
some
is for me as
people,
well.
yeah, it really is a big deal now, and I think that's been pushed more and more commercial-wise as it
Yeah,
always is.
I was shocked by the question today because we got asked on the live stream before this that what did Christmas mean? What did Easter mean to you? And it didn't really register, I don't think, with us.
No,
Well, that was
it's
me that
never.
asked that question. I.e., Easter, what was it like back in the day, so to speak? Were the
Mm,
same animals used in like petting zoos and all that kind of thing? Because as far as I'm concerned, which seemed to be the consensus of the board as well, that's something that gets worse year on year. I can't remember when I was young, there'd be like nurseries and soft play centres and stuff like that. Like I'm thinking when I was a kid and you go to like Megaden, they wouldn't have lambs there. That would never happen in 100 million years. But whereas now that could happen at a soft plated centre. Like I think it gets
well,
worse.
that's interesting because I mean, obviously, the core of Easter is supposed to be this religious thing, and I suppose back then it was more a religious thing, so it wasn't
Yeah,
such a
I'd say
commercial
that's a
thing.
good point. Yeah. It's now become more
I,
about commercialism and capitalism than it is
yeah,
about the story, so to speak, isn't it? So yeah, I'd say that's probably what it is, but it
I
definitely
mean,
seems to get
I
worse.
bet you religious people must hate Easter in the way that they've come to hate Christmas, probably.
I would imagine so. Yeah.
yeah, probably. Yeah, yeah. It's just another capitalist event, isn't it? I think it was starting to go that way when I was a kid, because even when I was a kid, I remember me. So my parents split up when I was young. So my dad's girlfriend at the time celebrated Easter, but she would never really buy. You would get like an egg, but then I remember getting like Bambi bought on VHS for us, and I was thinking like, and then bikes and stuff. Like a couple of years later, I was like, why am I getting a bike for like spring? Because obviously they change the season and stuff. But when I was working in Halfords, we used to sell shitloads of bikes for Christmas, for Easter, sorry, probably just as many as we did for Christmas.
Really?
Oh, loads, like loads. You would literally get through the Christmas rush. You would have January, and then towards the end of February, people would be starting to order their Easter bikes.
Oh, well, maybe that's just like a family thing. Like we've only ever been. I mean, even when I was younger, it's only ever been eggs. I used to get quite a lot of eggs. Don't get me wrong, because like years ago, when you get eggs from people that you weren't even close to, an egg was like a Christmas card, I suppose. So like sometimes you'd have like 20 eggs to open, but I don't remember ever getting like gifts on top of that. It would be eggs or like maybe a check from my nan.
Yeah, it was only ever me dad and his girlfriend that did the kind of the bigger stuff, and I'm guessing it was more her than him. Um, Although I did come from some parents that had obviously parted ways back in the early 90s, so it could just be him trying to compete.
It could be,
Um,
but no, this. I think I have seen people talk about like Easter gifts that are like fairly expensive gifts, as though it is Christmas too. Before, I mean, it's just
yeah.
obviously something that my family didn't do and I don't do.
Well, I don't either, to be fair. The boys got a couple of eggs. My mum's brought them an egg round. We've got them an egg, and I think we might have getting them like a little chocolate figure thing ish, but that's it. I
Yeah.
mean, and to be fair, but I know. Right, I'm telling you what, Roger, your cat really does not agree with what we're talking
No,
about.
no. So, Kev, do you do the thing about hiding the eggs and all that malarkey?
Nah, my mum used to, and yeah, when Freddie was little, she used to hide plastic eggs in the garden for him to go and find. But nah, the school do it though, because the school's got like a little forest school attached to it. It's got like a little wood. So the school do all that sort of stuff with them, so we don't have to too much of a faff on.
Roger, when you were like a kid, was it still like the emphasis on the rabbit too? Because I don't really understand that part. Still, I know that the rabbit's supposed to like symbolize fertility, but I've
Yeah,
never really understood the rabbit egg connection personally.
did you not know that rabbits laid eggs, Andy?
Well, that's the part that's always confusing. I mean, I know that that's not actually like what they're trying to. elaborate on or whatever. But I've just never really understood where that part came from, whether that was always the case or whether that's a more modern thing too.
Are they not both symbols of fertility?
Well, I guess so, but I don't know. Is that what it's supposed to cover? The rabbit covers, i.e., the action of fertility. I mean, that's kind of like what most people consider rabbits of, and then the egg is the product of that. I don't know. I don't understand it enough. I've never really understood it. That's why I was interested in whether like that was always the case, even back in the day.
Yeah, I know. Easter is originally it was a pagan kind of tradition, and it was based around fertility. It was basically just a mass orgy. But then obviously the Christians came over or Christianity came to become a thing. And it was to do with, I think it was to do with changing the seasons or solstice or something. And they basically changed the meaning of it.
Oh, okay. Welcome, Ronnie, by the way. How you doing?
I'm fine, yeah. I tried to join from my desktop, but I just couldn't find the button to click. So I'm on my phone now. Is it just audio tonight?
Yeah, stay on audio if you want to. Go on camera if you want to. I mean, I don't think anyone else will, though. You'd be on your own.
I don't mind really. I was just wondering because no one else seems to be. I can't see anyone else. So
yeah,
I think everyone.
There's certainly no obligation to come on or video on here now.
I think the difference with TikTok and YouTube is that people don't necessarily expect to see people's faces on lives. Yeah. Whereas I think YouTube, if you did just an audio stream on YouTube, people would be thinking, "What the hell is this? It's not radio."
They wouldn't watch it, would they?
Right, that's right.
They wouldn't be watching it. I probably can't stay too long. Tonight because I've got a load of work piled up. But I've been listening to the discussion for a little while trying to kind of join, and it's been interesting regarding Easter and everything.
What are your thoughts going back to, say, being a child? What was Easter like then?
Ronnie was never a child.
Well, when I was a child, see, my mum was Catholic, so it was a kind of Catholic Easter, which meant going to church more times than we normally did. I think we went Good Friday and then on the Sunday as well. So it was a pain in the arse because I always hated going to church. And as soon as I was old enough to say I was no longer going, when I was about 14, I just steadfastly refused to go. And then that was it, you see. But, when I was small, I obviously, couldn't really put up much resistance.
Yeah.
So that's what it was. It was like, the religion was quite a big part of it. And I suppose the only other thing I can really remember about it is Easter eggs. I don't think the food was any different to what we kind of normally eat at home.
So was Easter lamb not a thing then?
No, it wasn't in our house. I mean, I think normally on a Sunday, we often used to have lamb on a Sunday anyway, whether or not it was Easter. Okay. We'd either have lamb or beef, but normally it was lamb. So it didn't really make a lot of difference.
Yeah,
to what we on Friday. On Fridays we used to have fish because it used to be like a rule of the Catholic Church that you have to have fish on Friday. So we'd have fish on a Friday.
That's what they call it, Friday, isn't it?
To fry up the fish. I think you can eat any carcass of an animal on a Friday now if you're a Catholic. I don't think it has to be a fish. So no, it wasn't much. It wasn't kind of much different than the other time when I was a kid, except going to church a bit more than usual. That was probably about how it was. I mean, these days I kind of don't really bother. I don't really bother with Easter these days.
Colleen is saying that a roasted pig was the thing presumably in Canada, that backward place.
Yeah. I mean, it's a bit like Christmas, isn't it? That it kind of now it's the turkey is the big thing. Well, we never had turkey at Christmas when I was a kid. It was always chicken for some reason. I don't know whether we weren't rich enough to afford turkey, but of course in the old days it used to be a goose, and it was a poor goose that copped it, wasn't it? Christmas rather than the turkey. Going back to when you watch the Christmas Carol, he sends the kid out to buy a goose, doesn't he, Scrooge, at the end of it, because that used to be like the traditional animal that was You know,
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
it's killed and eaten at Christmas. Now, now it's now it's turkeys, isn't it? But we never had turkey at home. We used to have chicken. I don't know quite why that was. It probably to do with the cost.
Probably with the taste. Most people don't seem to like it.
It might be
Yeah,
the
that was
taste.
just
Yeah, a
Taste,
lot
but
of people
I'd
don't
imagine
like
cost
turkey.
as well, because there's still a significant
Yeah.
difference even these days, isn't there? So
It might have been. I mean, I think chicken. Sadly, chicken is a lot cheaper now because it's so intense. Chickens are so intensively reared.
Yeah, but
yeah.
chickens used to be a weekend food because they weren't that prevalent at the time before we got to
But
factory
would they
farming.
have still been farmed more so than turkeys? I'd imagine.
Yeah, they were. They were. I mean, turkey tended to be really Christmas. With the chickens, chicken for us was like, in our house, it was very rare, and it was kind of considered almost like a treat, which is kind of why I think we had it at Christmas. We very rarely had. Now there's chickens and everything now, isn't it? It's like all the time because they're so, that they're intensively bred in broiler farms, and so that's pushed the cost of them down. So they're much more affordable now.
Do you know this,
why...
Ronnie? Were chickens the first to be intensified, do you think?
I wouldn't be surprised. I think yeah, probably yes. To be quite honest,
yeah, I think so too.
I'm pretty sure.
Yeah,
from watching the animals film recently, that's what they said, that chickens were the first intensive farmed animal, and then cows.
Yeah, well, I mean, they all become pigs as well.
Pigs were already being done, and I mean this because I didn't know this, but like obviously that's filmed in 81, and they were just talking about sheep about to be the next one, so that hasn't even happened then. That's mad to think about.
Yes, and they tried battery pigs around about that time because they reported on that in the animals film.
Yeah,
didn't they? Rows of pigs on top of other pigs.
That's right. Which actually they have now tried again in China, and now are doing, aren't they, with their sort of
I think they kind of are doing in China. I mean, I don't know to what extent pigs were a traditional food in China. I mean, it's strange because there was somebody. I remember some years ago, this guy did intensive research into intensive and extensive, I think, into which was like, he was trying to work out which was the cruelest country in the world, right? And on the basis of the number of animals that were slaughtered, right? And just on the number of animals that were killed every year, it ended up being China, right? And the reason was, a lot of people thought, oh yeah, that's because they eat cats and dogs and all that, but it wasn't anything to do with that. It was to do with fish. It was to do with they had over there, and probably still have, a loads of aquaculture. Where fish are bred in pools and all that, and in huge numbers. And it was to do with the number of fish that they consumed, which was why they were like, I think the USA was number 2 on the list and that's how it's just number of animals consumed per head of population. I think he based it on, and it actually was China, but it was to do with the fish that they came out on top. But
do you know, Ronnie? I've got a chapter in David Nybert's book about capitalism and animal exploitation, and but somebody else, Peter Lai, I think he's called. He actually said that research suggests that the majority of Chinese people have never tasted dog flesh, and also,
not to mention how many of them actively protest when the festivals are on too. That part massively gets forgotten with people's xenophobia for the most part.
Yeah. They've done some amazing things, like actually stopping the trucks on the motorway.
Absolutely, yeah. And they don't just do it during the festival either. They work all year to secure places to make sure that when the festivals are ongoing, they can literally go in and rescue dogs, and they've got somewhere to go and all that sort of stuff. They work tirelessly, and yet they're tarred with the same brush by most people.
Yeah, that's the problem. There's good and bad people in all countries. and people that oppress other animals and people that try to save those animals in all countries. So it's totally wrong to tar everyone with the same brush.
Yeah, I mean, I think for a lot of people, it's not just the sort of, I don't know, xenophobia that comes into it. It's also kind of the deflection, isn't it? If you say China's really, really bad, or this country's really, really bad, it kind of eases what you're doing and what you're contributing to, because you're projecting onto someone supposedly doing something worse.
Yeah, I think people over here always like to think it's those horrible people in other countries that are cruel to animals, don't they?
Yeah.
You get that. Oh, it's them over there. We're not. Here in England, we're really kind, and like kind of it's bullshit, really, because of course in a lot of the poorer countries they haven't got the intensification of really rearing of animals that we've got here, and in many, probably most other countries throughout the world, the amount of animal products consumed is less than it is here.
Absolutely, yeah. And I mean, one of the points that I've made before when people go, these particular examples that are used in some of these films, they really select terrible places in third world countries, and I'm like, yeah, that's because they're easy to walk in and film. The reason that these are the examples is because you try walking into a meat processing plant in the UK. You try just walking in and filming like it's okay. And the money and the time that's spent to keep these secrets is huge. Whereas in these other countries, they don't even realise that it's meant to be a secret.
No, I think that's absolutely true.
Well, there's almost more honesty sometimes because they've got all the other animals on the street, and
absolutely that. Yeah. They don't go out of their way to hide things because they don't actually see them as wrong. Whereas in these Western countries, we absolutely know it's wrong, which is why we spend so much time and money hiding it.
Hey, Ronnie, I've got a question for you. You said tarring people with the same brush. So here's my woke lefty on the grounds that I'm the biggest woke lefty person in the movement. Is my woke lefty? Can we say tarring other people with the same brush?
I said that actually to relieve Ronnie. I don't
know. I think we can. I can't see.
Doesn't it come from tarring and feathering? No.
It comes from tarring and feathering, but the thing is, you're not feathering people, so it's not speciesist, is it? You're just using the tar, leave out the feathers.
Honestly, I didn't even realise that that's where it came from, tar and feathering.
Well, it must be.
Yeah. And now that you've said it, yeah.
Perhaps. Perhaps that's originally, yeah.
And
I suppose that might be where it comes from.
It could have been about. It could have been about roofing and stuff.
It could be. Okay, all right. And on that note, what is the leftist, wokest version that I can use instead of?
What? Instead of that?
Yeah, I don't want to say it again now.
We had this in the video about the kind of people that have been vegan for many years that Roger and I just took part in. It's like a live stream where John Cross has been vegan for 80 years. He talked about that
fly fishing.
About fly fishing, he kind of made an analogy that if you're kind of educated to be vegan, you sort of cast out the bait, and my vegan version was dangling the carrot.
Well, I think, I mean, as humorous as it all is, it's very important because language matters. It really does.
As soon as John said I shouldn't say this, I was thinking, well, don't then, John.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Oh no, yeah. But it's like, but so many. There are a lot of kind of phrases like that do sort of refer to the oppression of other animals, doesn't it? Like a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush, for instance.
Yeah. Is it Steve Best that does when he's talking about it, and he says it's kind of like what happens with language when we try and demonize other humans as well. Like if you want to invade a country, they're always rats, they're always snakes, they're always some animal first. It's kind of like you dehumanize them, and that's right. Why language is so important.
I've got a chapter in my PhD all about dehumanization processes. It's really interesting, and I saw recently on TikTok, Michael Caine was talking about his his national service status, and he was saying that it's a process that you've got to do. You've got to dehumanize the enemy because it makes them easier to kill. Because one thing that research suggests is that most soldiers who shoot at the enemy, they miss because they can't really bring themselves to really shoot properly.
It makes a lot of sense.
And so if you dehumanize them, it makes it easier.
Yeah, I mean, on that exact same note, I've read dozens and dozens and dozens of people who are either now vegetarian or vegan who were once forced on a hunting trip with their dad or granddad or uncle who say exactly the same things. Or even though they had the right lineup or whatever, they missed because it was almost like at that last moment they moved, they just couldn't do it. And they still traumatize them.
I remember going to a friend's house. I don't know. I think I was probably about 10 years old, and he had some air guns, and we were shooting cans off a wall, and then some birds landed. And he said, "Oh, I'm going to shoot those birds," but thankfully he'd run out of ammunition. And so he went indoors, said, "I'm going to go in and get some more like pellets for the air gun and shoot those birds." And when he went in the house, I chased the birds away.
Was that your first bit of direct action? Was it? Right?
Well, it was. Yeah, I did a few bits. I did a few bits of direct action for animals when I was a kid, and that was. I think that might have been one of the earliest examples of it. And then he came out. I said, "Oh, the birds flew away," like
And you
didn't know I
embarrassed
chased
your
him away.
family on that boat, didn't you, as well?
Yeah, there was. We went for a trip to a safari park. This is when I was about 12, and we were on a boat. There was a lake, and there were seals in this lake, and there was this boat, like a kind of had an outboard motor powering it, and the idea was going out into this lake. The guy that was like steering the boat, he had a bucket of fish on the boat, and he was throwing them into the water to track the seals. So seals would come near the boat, and people could take photos of the seals. But there was one seal jumped in the boat and started nicking the fish out of the bucket. So there was an oar in the boat, or a paddle, like a small oar, in case the engine packed up. And this guy from the safari park started beating the seal with his oar. And I went mad. I started calling him all the names under the sun. You cruel bastard. And I threatened to get him the sack and everything. And everyone was so embarrassed because the rest of my family was on the boat. My mum, my dad and my sister. And there was other people as well. And everybody else kept really quiet, and they were all embarrassed. And I was shouting at this guy. And when we got home, I said to my parents, "I'm going to phone up the safari park. I'm going to get that guy the sack." And they were saying, "Oh no, don't cause trouble and all this." But I phoned them up. I phoned up the safari park, spoke to the manager, said, "You got to give this guy the sack. He beat the seal." So like even at that age, I was like up for, I took action type thing,
Then he became a coalman and got the sack every day. Hey, there's an interesting, interesting conversation between Vegan Means Love and Kerry about the property status of other animals going on, which is quite interesting in the chat, because the property status is one of the major issues, certainly for people like Gary Francione. He argues that other animals need just one right, the right not to be property. Although I think other people have pointed out that doesn't cover everything, but I suppose it covers a lot, doesn't it?
It covers. There's actually a lot it doesn't cover, because say it's like an example. Let's take an example of the HS2. The railway. They're kind of where they're driving through like natural habitat and like destroying the homelands of other animals.
Yeah, and what about fox hunting?
Well, I was about to say, what about the non-vegans' biggest concerns? Crop deaths.
I mean, they're not concerned about crop deaths.
Yes, they are. They care very, very much.
Oh, they care about. Suddenly, they've begun caring about,
they're insect
certain
rights
animals.
activists.
Yeah, because I mean, in that sense, when it comes to the bees or any of the insects, the rodents, any of these, it's not a property issue. It's a case of they're in the way or a problem.
ILF? No, Insect Liberation Front.
The Insect Liberation Front.
There's been a recent report, hasn't there, that they say shows that bees are sentient.
Yes.
I read an article in the
bees have always been marked out, even within the vegan community, as being
sentient,
insects which are a bit different from everybody else.
Yes, I think that's true. But if bees are sentient, then that does raise the question about other insects, doesn't it?
Yeah. I think Benny posted about this the other day and commented on and said, I don't know why they do these studies. How does it help their cause? Because they exploit bees to the maximum. So saying they're sentient only makes it worse. They'd be better off ignoring them.
Any colony insect will have some level of sentience, because they need to have some level of sentience in order to organize and kind of coordinate together. At the very least, that they work as a team, as one single unit.
Yeah, but Kevin, a lot of people would have dismissed that as just instinct, wouldn't they?
Well, I kind of, a lot of people would, but it's like, how can the bees instinctually work together? Or like ants, for example, it's not instinct for ants to work as a team in order to accomplish one single goal that they know that they need to accomplish. Instinct would be move away from the thing that hurts.
Yeah, and the other thing about it too, I mean, even if you could say that instinct covered all of the actions of their day-to-day lives, would instinct allow one ant to recognize that another ant was not part of the same colony? Or would they not just recognize them as another ant that's doing the same thing as them? Yeah. Surely that's where the sentience part would come into it. That awareness that, okay, you look the same, but we're not the same.
And no one's saying that they're as sentient as us or a cow or a pig or a sheep, but they're sentient enough to be aware of what's happening around them.
Yeah, they must be. In the same way also, I mean, I guess you could also potentially argue that part of it's instinctual, but the over hundreds and hundreds of years, how they've learned to adapt, how certain insects have learned to adapt or even now be immune to certain pesticides, insecticides and things like that. I mean, take the cockroach, for example. They've literally developed immunity to dozens and dozens of poisons over the years, where they have to keep increasing the strength of them. So, like, there must be something there.
That could be kind of natural selection, though. In that the ones that,
What about, say, for example, I don't know if you've ever seen those videos of where they put I'm trying to think what the thing is. It's aspartame down, the stuff that they put in soft drinks, and like ants will bury it. They'll literally work together to cover it up rather than feed off it. Like, they'll know that it's bad. Whereas obviously sugar, they do the opposite with. But there must be something.
It gives them tooth decay.
But to the point where they don't just avoid it, they bury it, they hide it. There's been numerous experiments done.
I think the answer really, the practical answer is we've got to really give them the benefit of the doubt, haven't we? And try our best to avoid harming them as far as we can. And that would certainly mean, excluding, keeping bees in a situation where they're exploited for their honey and where a lot of them are actually killed, in the process of honey production, a lot of bees get killed and that isn't acceptable. For and certainly for a product, it's a sweetener, isn't it? And there are lots of other sweeteners that don't involve that oppression of animals, that exploitation of animals.
So going back to the cockroach then, so if this is more like an evolutionary thing than anything else, then surely that again is just a stronger argument for their right to exist. Like, you've tried to essentially render them extinct, and nature, if you want to look at it, or biology, or however you want to define it, has said, no, there's a reason for them. We're going to make them even stronger.
Yeah, somebody's asking. Well, it's Kerry. Hello, Kerry. Kerry might sound stupid, but do spiders feel pain?
I mean, I don't know the scientific consensus on that, but I would make the assumption that they can. Therefore, I wouldn't want to put it to the test.
I think we need to should give them the benefit of the doubt on that, and kind of act as if they do, and
you'll get the ALF, the arachnid liberation.
Yeah, the spot. That's right. Yeah. But,
I mean, let's just say hypothetically tomorrow they released some scientific consensus that said actually we've been doing these studies now for a few years and spiders don't feel pain. Would it still give me the right to cause them any harm or infringement? No. So whether they can or not is kind of irrelevant.
I think it's something to do with size as well. I imagine those people who keep those tarantulas and those really big kind of ones that sit on your palm and kind of look cute, compared with the little ones that you can hardly see. I imagine that the people who keep the big ones will probably say that they are sentient.
Yeah, I would say that you're right there. True.
And there's probably not a huge amount of difference between a large spider and a small spider in kind of their behavioral traits. There'll be a lot of similarities there. Yeah.
Oh.
I suppose it would be the difference between people saying that like a dog, for example, is sentient and has a personality, but a coyote is just a pest animal. They're basically very, very similar animal. One's just being brought up around humans, and the other one's being brought up wild.
I've always wondered whether if evolution had worked differently, whether we'd be going around kind of squishing cats and dogs because they're little diddy things, and yet we'd have a big kind of cuddly spider on our laps,
Maybe. It's funny that that's not consistent. I mean, let's say on the odd examples where an elephant has trampled a person to death, have they ever been given that while they are bigger? No.
No.
Well,
that's interesting.
And therefore more sentient. You mean?
No, but like obviously, if might is right, then why doesn't that extend? I mean, it's the opposite, right? I mean, if one shark kills one surfer...
You're expecting too much for humanity there, Andy. It's kind of like, oh, mighty's right when it comes to us.
Yeah,
and then someone bigger and mightier. Oh, no, that's not fair.
Yeah, and it's even worse than that, I suppose, when you talk for, say, like sharks, for example. I mean, if a shark that's bigger than a surfer, there's not even no might is right. It's like, how many sharks can we murder to seek revenge?
Yeah. We need to go and kill that shark, but any shark will do.
Yeah, exactly that. And quite often they'll take a dozen out, and not even with no guarantees they got the one that they wanted.
Yeah.
Well, that's the police mentality about nicking criminals, really. But if they know you're at it, it doesn't matter if they get you for what you've actually done.
But the thing about sharks, it's humans that invaded their territory.
I was about to say, the sea police to remove the surfer for trespass, then it would remove the problem.
The shark don't come down the high street like biting people. Do they? It's humans that have gone in. Surfers don't have to go to the sea. You ain't going to die if you don't go in where the sharks are. Just avoid going. Just avoid going in there. Do you know what I mean? Just that's where they live.
Well, yeah, and I mean, in seriousness, when you actually think about how many people per day go in the sea versus how many people per year are killed by sharks, I mean,
I think it's versus how many sharks per year that leave the sea for a second.
Yeah, it's
come in Tesco and carry out some kind of massacre.
Yeah,
in there.
Yeah, and I mean, we're not even talking like Jaws, are we? Where sharks are coming into small bays.
Shark attack.
Kids. We're talking surfers or whatever who are out to sea, invading their space, scuba diving or any of these things. It's not. They're not even coming into places where people are. It's still us going into where they are.
I mean, this might be a fairly ignorant point of view, but the way I see it is, if you go into the territory or the territory, the habitat of an animal whose instinct is to hunt, then you can't complain when you are hunted, because at the end of the day, we, as much as we'd love to think that we are the apex predator of the world, because the human species has a massive superiority complex. As soon as you put us in a natural situation, in a natural environment of an animal that is actually a predator, then we come out worse every single time.
Yeah.
Like if you were to stick us in the Sahara Desert with nothing but, our hands to defend ourselves, and we come up against a bunch of hyenas or a lion, we'd be dead.
Come up against a scorpion or a spider, or in some instances, a mosquito.
Yeah, exactly that. We eat the wrong plant and we're dead.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely.
we're quite a fragile species when you think about
We
it.
don't even find shade in sufficient time. I mean, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we've just unfortunately, I suppose we've got the brain capacity to understand what we need to avoid and how we can kind of use the surroundings for our betterment. But actually, like I say, I wouldn't want to be stuck somewhere with nothing but a sharp stick and a lion.
Oh, look out! It's
A sheep defended themselves from you. What?
Yeah.
Violating them,
Language Liberation
burglarizing.
Front. Yeah, I got kicked by a sheep today for milking it. Well, clearly,
Yeah, I mean,
if you're
Kerry,
milking an individual, you've got to assume that the individual was female, and therefore you've got to assume that the right pronoun is her.
Yeah, correct. Kerry, how would you act if you were walking down the street on your phone and someone tried to take your phone out your hand?
How can you walk down the street on the phone?
With your phone in your hand? Say you're texting, you're watching this live, walking down the street, and someone just walks past and goes, yoink, what are you going to do?
Well, imagine, I mean, to give a slightly more realistic version of that, imagine there's a young mother trying to breastfeed their child in the street, and somebody comes and tries to start to extract milk from the other breast. What would you expect?
Yeah, there's a big queue in Costa.
Without asking permission, just come up, remove the baby, and stuck a suction cup on there. You would expect probably one to be whacked by the mother, and two, probably be accosted by the general public around you.
Yeah, and then probably be arrested.
Yeah, but because sheep are covered in wool, and we see them as property, then it's okay.
There was some street theatre years ago, which was very controversial, based on exactly what you just said, Kev. That it was done by this group called 269, I think it was, and it was all staged, of course. And this woman walking down the street with a baby in arms, and the activists went running up to her, and they snatched the baby and they ripped her shirt off, and then dragged her to this machine and stuck these suction cups on her breasts and everything. And you could tell by the reaction of the public that they were just completely shocked, because it looked like, a really kind of bad sexual assault type of thing. Yeah, and I'm not quite sure whether the public intervened. I think they were more kind of completely shocked by it.
You probably would get that kind of almost that Stockholm syndrome kick in that situation, wouldn't you? Where you all see something. I don't know if it's called Stockholm syndrome. It's called something else when a crowd just stand by and allow something abhorrent to happen because they're either too shocked or expect somebody else to intervene, that they don't intervene themselves, and then no one does.
Yeah, that's bystander, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah. But I can imagine in something like that where it is kind of as violent, if you will, as that, then you would get that bystander syndrome kicking in. Everyone would just be in shock of what they were looking at. But like I say, like you put a different species in front of people and they don't bat an eye.
No.
Like I say, the human species have got this supremacy kind of trait at the minute. Well, I think they probably always have. We believe that we are more important than any other species, and in reality, we're the one species of animal. If we went extinct, everyone else would thrive.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because there would have been a time when that kind of human supremacy, and Ronnie talks about that all the time, where that developed, because at the time when we were foragers and scavengers, we probably weren't feeling that way at all, in the sense that we were cowering behind a rock waiting for the hyenas and the lions to go and that kind of stuff. And we would probably have seen ourselves not at the top of any idea of a food chain, but kind of in risk ourselves. And so there would have been a change, and maybe that's to do with technology, fire, that kind of stuff, and then domestication. That kind of story is quite interesting, but fairly complex, I would think.
Yeah, I mean, how much of that do you think has got down to commerce as well, like the invention of money and trade?
Well, the invention of private property. Marx's mate Engels. He once posited that private property and patriarchy developed all at once, where you got a situation where people started to domesticate other animals, and then they started to understand the reproduction system, because until then it was a bit of a mystery to males, kind of, because if they had sex with a female and then 9 months later baby, there was no connection to that sex 9 months previously. And it wasn't until we started to domesticate other animals where we started to realize how the process worked, right? And then other animals became items of property. It's a kind of it's a core idea of capitalism. Cattle, and so then they started to fence them in, and then they thought, well, the more we get, the richer I am. And then the men wanted to hand down their property to their sons. So that meant that they had to know who their sons were. And so that meant that they had to then start to control female reproduction systems, because they used to call it a promiscuous horde, early humanity. People were just kind of shagging each other type of thing. And then men, because of the property situation, they wanted to pass it down, and so therefore they started to control women. So patriarchy and property developed at the same time, according to this theory.
Makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense. Yeah, it's really interesting, that.
I think there's also the role of religion, isn't there? Because you have, for instance, Christianity talking about the dominion of humans over other animals. And I think many religions reinforce this idea of human supremacy, whether that's because humans were supremacists first and then, kind of wrote the religions to kind of to reflect that. It may have been that way around, but certainly I think, religion is a major driver of human supremacism as well.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. There's always been a few people at the top that have been looking to gain or exploit, and that's the best way to convince other people. So if you convince them that you're top of the food chain or top of any chain, or you've got the most knowledge or whatever, people always follow you.
Well, I suppose we almost are a herd animal, aren't we? I mean, that's the reason why civilization works. That's the reason why we're social. We need to be in groups. And I suppose if we need to be in groups from a natural point of view, then it's natural that there would be, for want of a better term, some form of pecking order in there.
Yeah, well, that's exactly why solitary confinement is seen as a torture or a punishment.
Yeah. Whereas, I mean, I think a lot of people realised during lockdown actually how much they enjoyed that solitariness that they probably hadn't never had before. Because I think that's a big part of it as well. We are sort of social, but at the same time, a lot of that is not even up to us, is it? We've got jobs.
Yeah, but Andy, I think most people complained about the isolation, didn't they?
I think it was, I don't know. I mean, maybe it's just people that I speak to as opposed to the general public then, because most of the people that I enjoyed it and enjoyed seeing the fact that...
No, they were just pleased to get away from you. That's what that's going on.
But I mean, I guess I'm talking in the sense that I've mainly been speaking to other vegans about the subject, I guess. But it's like in terms of not just you learning more about stuff by having the time to learn or read or listen or watch, but also just in the sense that like nature got a chance to be itself again, or actually reclaim some of these areas where humans weren't visiting for a little while. I enjoyed lockdown. I'm not gonna lie, I did.
I think some people did and some people didn't, and I think also there were some aspects of it that were positive and some aspects of it that weren't. I think it's a bit of a mixture. I mean, I certainly enjoyed the fact that there were kind of fewer vehicles about, and to some extent that there were fewer people about. Yeah, I did. I kind of did like that. I think where I was frustrated was that it kind of interfered with vegan outreach. It interfered with my ability and ability of other people to kind of get out there and
true. But on that note, were you doing things like the Zoom conferences and stuff like that?
I think a positive thing, and then again, a positive thing that came out of it, which otherwise wouldn't have happened, is I got to learn more about using social media to spread the message.
Yeah.
And kind of have carried on with that even now that the lockdown's ended. So that was something that came out of it that otherwise wouldn't have happened. So that kind of was a positive.
Yeah, I think a lot of it just got transferred online. I mean, I'm like Andy. Yes. I absolutely loved lockdown. I mean, and also, I mean, there was some free living beings did as well. I remember being at the Back into Daylight Sanctuary, and I remember Sharon from the Sanctuary looking at the sky and said, "Have you noticed in recent weeks how clear the sky has been? And all that, and how quiet it is because there's no planes." And we were going, "Yeah, And then there was a report about how whales were thriving because the oceans were quieter.
Yeah,
because there was a lot less human traffic on the oceans. And obviously with the whale's way of communicating, it's quite disruptive to them. I think the suggestion is that the noise that we make in the ocean is quite disruptive and traumatic for whales. Whereas
in a couple of different ways, isn't it? Obviously you've got the short sort of proximity noise of the engine, but also in terms of like sonar and things like that. Yeah, absolutely. And then there's absolutely tens of thousands of these the modernized buoys that send out like a distress beep every 3 or 4 seconds as well, which messes with them. So the boats haven't even necessarily got to be there anymore.
But it's strange. Like in response to that kind of threat to humanity, people accepted that big changes had to be made, and the vast majority of people accepted that their lives had to change quite radically, and accepted kind of restrictions on things they were doing. And yet, in terms of the climate crisis, that doesn't happen, and yet that is just as serious a threat as what COVID was.
I think that's because people aren't being directly affected by it at the minute. Some people are, but the vast majority of people who need to change aren't being inconvenienced by it. So, like the UK, we're not having like desert-like summers. We're not having subterranean, not subterranean, like Arctic winters. But what I believe about the climate crisis is that the human race will, as a whole, as a collective, will start to jump up and down once it's too late. Once the acid rain starts falling, once the
I fear that very, very much too, Kevin. I think that we're going to wait as we usually do for these things, and eventually, once we actually wake up and start doing it, I think it's going to be too late.
Yeah, absolutely. In the movie style 2012 and that sort of thing, where it's already happening before people really start to take it seriously. Yeah, I think exactly the same thing. How many warnings do people need about any of this stuff?
Unlike the movie 2012, it won't just kind of happen like overnight, though. It'll be running up to this for the last 100 years, and we'll.
Yeah, but that's the problem, though, isn't it? Because for a lot of people, it's not happening at all. But for other people, it's happening.
And I think the danger is tipping points, that you reach a tipping point, and once you've reached that, there's kind of no going back, whatever you do.
Yeah, but we don't, Ronnie. We in the privileged kind of rich West, we don't reach tipping points before all the little islands, the poor people.
Oh, no, lots of other people. Well, tipping point has already been reached for. I mean, the main victims of the climate crisis are and will be other animals, not humans.
Yeah.
There'll be animals, free living beings,
Well,
animals living
it'll
in the
be
wild.
other animals and poor humans. That's
Other animals,
and I suppose as well,
yeah,
when
exactly.
these tipping points happen in some of these other countries, what most people consider to be lesser popular countries, all that kind of thing, that it's used against them to further divide or demonize those countries. It's not like, oh shit, look what's happening here. What can we do to help? It's like, oh, what they're whinging about.
Yeah, I mean, those that are being affected now are those that already live in extreme climate anyway, isn't it? It's those that live kind of like borderline desert or borderline kind of.
Yeah, but we do tend to kind of demonize them, don't we? Because it's kind of like, they're underdeveloped. Well, why is that? They're lazy and all that kind of stuff. I remember once, right, back in the 70s, I couldn't believe this. I almost fell off my bleeding chair. This woman said they were talking about third world starvation. It might have been something to do with George Harrison's Bangladesh concert or something. And this woman said, well, if these people waste their dole on cigarettes or whatever, they were like talking about rural Africa. I mean, you can't make some people up. Graham says something interesting. Going back to the lockdowns, the wildlife coming back into the towns was beautiful too. I remember the case of, because I used to go there a lot when I was in North Wales, a place called Llandudno, and there's a place called the Great Orme, which is a big kind of rock, and there were free-living goats on there, and they came back into the town of Llandudno when the lockdowns were on. It was absolutely amazing, because I saw pictures of them, walking around the kind of touristy areas, where people would normally be. It was absolutely really incredible. It's almost like seeing something out of a movie,
Yeah, but it also makes you think, doesn't it, that like, are they returning because we're not long there, or have they always been kept away? Like, this was always where they wanted to be, and like now it's their first.
Well, most of the animals, I think, Andy, have got the sense to keep away from us because they know how bleeding violent we are.
Yeah, I mean, I would say the same. Yeah, it just makes you think, doesn't it, that like when we talk about they came into the town, well, maybe for as long as they've ever known, the town is their town, and they've just been waiting for an opportunity to return when we weren't there.
Well, all these places were originally the territory of other animals, weren't they? Yeah. I mean, the vast majority of this country, and indeed, I think the vast majority of the world, the kind of land mass of the world, at one time was forest. Humans have deforested that for various reasons, and one of the major reasons is, of course, animal agriculture. And so towns were previously the territory. They lived in these places long before humans did, and so they're just going back to the territory that was originally theirs, really.
Yeah. I mean, in the same sense you mentioned earlier with the hunting gathering sort of foresting thing. It's kind of the same. You'd wait for an opportunity rather than taking a risk, and it's kind of the same with them. They waited for us to be gone. I mean, they absolutely avoid us.
I mean, even if the animals haven't made a connection with the fact that we are a violent species, then think about if you don't understand towns and villages. So you wander towards this black hard strip on the floor with things that growl and travel incredibly fast that you don't see coming. You're going to go nowhere near that for a start, are you? You're going to go nowhere near a road to begin with.
Not unless you have to, no, yeah.
Yeah, not unless you have to, yeah, because obviously the projectiles that are on there, you're going to sense are dangerous, and the sound sounds dangerous. And then if you ever go to anywhere near a human, then you're probably going to get shooed and kind of wailed at and kind of arms flailing and all sorts. So even just the basics, I suppose, you one interaction and you'd find that the flock would go nowhere near. But yeah, I mean, I kind of agree with what you guys were saying. I think free living beings will roam, and they'll roam where it is safe to roam, and they'll stay away from areas that they know aren't safe to roam, especially like flock and herd animals, because it's passed down generationally, isn't it? It's like, stay away from that area there. It's almost like the Lion King where they talk about the elephant graveyard. Stay away from that area over there because that's not safe. We need to go over to this area over here.
Yeah, I think natural selection has kicked in as well with that, because the ones that were kind of friendlier towards humans, then they got killed because they'd approach humans, and the humans would kill them or harm them, and so they kind of became naturally selected to be wary of humans, because it was the ones that were more wary of humans that actually survived. Because I think if we had a vegan, a vegan, well, certainly like a vegan controlled society where the sort of vegan ethics prevailed, that after a period of time, other animals would begin to become more friendly to us as well, and they would come up to us and perhaps enjoy human company on their own terms.
Yeah, that's what John Bryant said in Feta
Yes.
Kingdom, isn't it?
Yeah. To come up and kind of, for a bit of fuss, or a bird might land on your shoulder or something like that, because they'd no longer have that fear.
I suppose it would be like
humans.
Yeah, acting more like horses, wouldn't it? I suppose, like, obviously without being ridden, but you know how you see a horse in a field and they'll generally come towards humans rather than walk away from.
Yes, I think it would be like that. They'd see us as friendly.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, some animals we'd have to be wary of. The ones that were like the predators, but the other ones, I think, would kind of see us as like as friendly, and maybe that we make a fuss of them, and be of interest to them rather than generating fear in them. And
I think that's the key part, isn't it? Even if they never became, say, docile enough to want to be touched or any of this kind of stuff, the fact that we were no longer seen as a threat.
Yes. Yeah, I think that would happen. How many generations it would take? It'd probably take quite some while, but I think eventually that would actually happen, and I think it would be a much more wonderful world for ourselves, as well as for the other animals, if that were the case.
Yeah, it would. I mean, imagine. I suppose it would be almost like, to humanize it a little bit. It would be like walking through a town crippled with anxiety versus walking through a town and feeling relaxed. That's almost like how the animals feel now, crippled with anxiety when they see humans, versus not batting an eyelid when they see another human.
Yeah, and I suppose the other part of that is also, I mean, if we were in this world where that was the way everyone was thinking, then obviously in terms of space, in terms of like rewilding, in terms of all these other things, food abundance, all that kind of stuff, they'd be greatly improved. So the actual times where you would have these experiences, those would be, unless you were going into woods or unless you were walking through meadows and places like that, these experiences would now be few and far between too. Because you wouldn't have foxes coming into urban environments and things like that, because they'd have their own space again.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing is that our space would be kind of, I think, much more integrated with the space of other animals. In other words, the way, kind of like the way we live in towns and everything. I think a lot of that would be made more wildlife friendly. It would be more friendly to to free living beings.
Yeah, I mean, take things like for example, so just to take the motorways into consideration. Obviously, like going down the road, so to speak, but we're potentially always going, even if cars improve and become more efficient and more, environmentally friendly and all these kind of things, we're still going to be utilizing those roads for probably the next few decades at the very least. So we'd have to think, why can't we build like bridges that cross from field to field that are literally designed for wildlife? How hard is that?
They've already done that in Holland, haven't they? I think
these are simple things that we could implement. Or if the bridge isn't possible, then an underpass.
Yeah.
Because that road is literally going through what once upon a time it was there. So respect that at the very least.
Yes, and I think even develop transport systems that are low impact on other animals, and indeed kind of on other humans, because humans, get killed by motor vehicles as well.
Yeah.
I mean, one idea would be for something called evacuated tube transport, and that is kind of the nearest kind of we've got to that in sport. In some stores that they put the money in this kind of container, and put it in a tube, and it disappears off somewhere. It used to be very common in the old days, but it's coming back a bit now. I've seen it in some stores, and it's that same technology but you have a much bigger container that can act as like a kind of where people can people can travel in these things, and they can reach massively high speeds of like couple of thousand miles an hour, really really fast, and that could be developed as a form of transportation. I mean, obviously not kind of really local transport, but certainly for sort of, travelling at a distance, and things like that could actually kind of replace motorways and even replace railways, because there's no interaction like with the outside environment. It's contained within the tube, so that you wouldn't have the casualties, the animal casualties that we have now.
Yeah. But I mean, these are the kind of things that don't often get talked about. That, like, quote unquote vegan world, that we'd have to take all of these things into consideration every time the infrastructure was planned going forward. Whether this was a redevelopment, whether this was a new build, all of this stuff. Those others that already live there or will be directly affected by what's going on will be considered and taken into consideration going forward, as opposed to, well, they're in the way, just kill them.
Yes. Yeah, that's right. So there's a lot of things that kind of, are a problem at the moment that kind of wouldn't be, because we'd be fully focused on solving those problems in relation to the impact on other animals, wouldn't we? As you say, that other animals are given no consideration now in terms of, any kind of construction, or they're given very little consideration when humans.
Yeah, I mean, we're not talking about, for example, let's go back to HS2. We're not talking about, there's a badger set there, let's write them a check. We're talking about, there's a badger set there, we will have to go round. In the same way that if that was a house with people living in it, you'd be like, well, I mean, actually, to be fair, they probably wouldn't. They'd write them a check too. But you know what I'm trying to say.
Well, there's a famous farm, isn't there, in the middle of the A1?
That's right. Yeah.
Where they refuse to move, and now they've got like a cottage in the middle of the A1, which then parts around it, and then they've got like tunnels going underneath the carriageways and stuff.
Isn't that the M62 from Liverpool through to the other side of Leeds? I think it might be that.
I think it's the M6. I used to go through it when I used to visit. Is it the Liverpool to Manchester exit, that bit afterwards, where you go left, basically?
No, I think it's further on into Yorkshire, but I know what you mean, because there's a bit where the road completely splits.
Yeah, that's where I'm thinking, and there's a house in the middle of it.
Yeah, it's in the kind of the Yorkshire Dales, kind of the West Yorkshire Dalesy area. Not sure what road.
Bloody stubborn Yorkshireman, that's what it was.
Can you imagine?
Yeah, these exceptions are few and far between, sadly. But yeah, it would be nice if that was kind of the outlook. Look, we'll have to find another way.
Well, Donald Watson was a stubborn Yorkshireman, so.
Yeah. Well, that we don't have too much of that though anymore, do we? That sort of, I mean, we have stubbornness, but it's in the wrong way. It's stubbornness to move forward. It's stubbornness to accept change.
Yeah.
We don't have stubbornness to stick to our morals.
Yeah, wouldn't that be nice?
Even that stubbornness now, it's got a price on, doesn't it, for certain things? You'll be stubborn to a certain value point, and once someone offers you enough money, your stubbornness will be like, oh, actually, tell you what, yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, to some degree, morals can definitely be brought, can't they, for some people? It's a case of, look at just take politicians into example, and the amount of them that actually start off at, say, the roots level, where they do sort of door-to-door campaigns and they're actually pretty decent people. And I'm not saying they're not still decent people when they get to the top, but they've been so kind of poisoned or conditioned or whatever it is by the environment that they're now spending however many days a week in, that they're not the same person that knocked on your door. Their values and their ethics are very much now what those around them want them to be.
Yeah,
who the shareholders
principles,
that are
isn't
funding
it?
their
Principles
campaigns
can be bought and sold.
Yeah.
There's a great meme about the vegan strategist where he's going, "Oh, you don't like my principles? Well, I've got others."
Yeah. Can we rebrand that vegan strategist? Like plant-based
vegan knobhead,
projectionist, something like that.
Vegan knobhead.
Yeah. Because yeah. But sadly, like this is the one thing that I worry about. That if something happened sort of overnight and there was some sort of Thanos snap and we said, right, we've got this 50% of the UK now are vegan, and we moved into like having a vegan parliament, all these kind of things, I'd be worried about who those people were and what their actual motives were and how easily they could be influenced because of how loose the term vegan is these days.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting question for Ronnie, because, of course, there is that thing, isn't there, that anybody who wants to be a politician should be barred from being...
Yeah, 100% yes. The fact that that's your wish should be excluded from the position.
I think the problem is I think we have to consider the sort of reality of the situation that we're in, and I think there are certain vegans I know or people call themselves vegan. I wouldn't want them to be in charge of anything.
Yeah, I mean, let's just use him. Let's say, I mean, it's very unlikely, but let's say it was Tobias that became the Prime Minister of England.
Yes. Yeah, but I think
you see
that.
You're going to give me nightmares tonight.
I'd be moving to Ireland.
I think that's an argument for for the idea of vegan education kind of continuing within veganism. It's not just a case of educating people to become vegan or to want to become vegan, but to continue educating those people who do become vegan or who think they're vegan. That's the thing. It's just to educate those people at what veganism really means. So you don't just stop as soon as the person stops eating animal products. You don't say, right, like, my job's done in terms of education. I think that kind of needs to continue, because there are so many people calling themselves vegan that don't really understand what veganism is.
Yeah, so the problem with that, though, Ronnie, is that people have got to be educatable as well. So it's a two-way street. I mean, some people get to a certain status and they, oh, right, I'm the big know-it-all now, and so there's nothing you can tell me, mate,
Yes, I mean, obviously that is the case in terms of people refusing to be educated. I mean, it's obviously that is obviously a problem with a lot of non-vegans. A lot of non-vegans, refuse to be educated to become vegan, and there'll be a lot of people thinking they're vegan that refuse to be educated any further.
Look, Ronnie, let's think if we can draw an analogy. Say we take a group like $1 Million Vegan, right? Do you think that the grassroots, anybody has been able to persuade them that it wouldn't be a great idea to offer £1 million to another right-wing wanker?
Well, you can't. Yeah, I mean, I'd hope that they'd be able to be educated. Whether or not that would be the case, I really don't know. We'd have to wait and see as to whether they do it, and who the next one's going to be. Are they going to be able to choose anyone worse than the ones that they've chosen already? Perhaps they're waiting for a huge tyrant. It's a pity they missed out on Bolsonaro, didn't they? They could have offered him £1 million before he got.
It's hard to imagine anybody worse than the Pope, Trump, and bloody shit. Sunak, isn't it?
Serious question about that. I mean, obviously they've had responses on like social media to this campaign and all that sort of thing. But do you think anyone seriously at the top level has actually sat down and said this is wrong for these reasons? Do you think they might actually be approachable in that regard and say, look, if this money's available, why don't you invest it in this instead?
I mean, yeah.
Because I mean, I keep looking at this thinking, we can keep having these conversations, but unless we're kind of challenged where it's wrong, how is anyone ever going to know?
I suppose as well, if one of can you imagine if Rishi Sunak took them up on that offer to go vegan for however long it was and get £1 million, people wouldn't be talking about the fact that he'd adopted a plant-based lifestyle. They'd be talking about the fact he was going to get £1 million.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, it wasn't even anything to do with going vegan anyway. Didn't he just have to agree to eat plants for a month?
I think
Yeah.
it was something like
Well,
plant-based for a month, yeah.
Well, they said go vegan, but it didn't mean go vegan. It obviously meant just adopt a vegan diet for a month.
Another problem. Not only was it a completely wacko idea in the first place, but it also added to the disrespect and the misrepresentation of what veganism was.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
You mean to tell me that it's not just a diet?
No.
Yeah. Newsflash, Kev. Newsflash.
But I think perhaps, you know, the kind of one of the positive things that came out of it was it kind of provoked a discussion about what veganism really is and, you know, what it means. It provoked
I can't think of the lady's name who was on one of the live earlier that you did on Facebook, but she listed like about 6 or 7 documentaries, and I remember sitting there thinking, health, diet, welfare. Cool. No wonder nobody knows what the movement means. These are the films they're suggesting to people, and that's the directions that they're going in.
You know what I think it is, Andy? I think there's a kind of level of kind of discourse within the movement which is kind of removed from us in the grassroots, where they all talk to each other, but they all talk their own same kind of capitalist-based language. They all kind of really kind of get each other, but it's kind of like, to us, it's almost like a foreign language.
Yeah.
Do you think they've almost? I would, and I obviously almost sounds like a conspiracy theory, almost, Roger. But I kind of agree because they're all regurgitating the same information. They all go through the same cycles. They all, like the big names, you tend to find that the same subject matter is coming around at the same time, and it might be something unrelated to a headline or a time of the year. It might just be that, you know, crop deaths has now started coming up and everyone's talking about it, and the kind of the big hitters when it comes to following, they're all talking about it. So it's almost like I could imagine that they've created their own echo chamber for themselves, in order to, I don't know, get peer support from other people in their position, I suppose, for want of a better term. But essentially what they've done is created this almost capitalist bubble for themselves.
Yeah, well, I'd agree with that. I mean, like, for years and years and years, and I started to realize it when I was down at the BYV in 1982, that there was a difference between careerists and activists, and the careerists kind of saw a problem, you know, animal rights violations, for example, although they probably wouldn't put it that way. But then what they thought, oh, look at that, there's a career here for me. Whereas everybody else thought, oh, there's a problem to be solved. And so I suddenly realized that there are a lot of people who would interpret a problem in terms of what can, you know, where can I fit into this in terms of my P45? And as soon as I realized there was some people like that in the movement, I was always very wary of them, I've got to say.
Well, I suppose there's that saying that we kind of almost use when we're coming to talking to farmers, where you can't expect someone to understand whose paycheck depends on them not. So that would be the same for a career activist, wouldn't it? Because they could see a fundamental wrong, but think, "Ooh, if I post about that, my paycheckers, if you will, my paid customers won't be happy about it. So I'm not going to."
Well, yeah, because I mean, it boils down to the fact that there isn't, sadly, as many vegans as we would want, and that means then that the kind of vegans that exist in the world are not enough to fund the vegan industry, if you want to put it that way.
Yeah.
And so therefore they've got to widen their support base, and so that means that they've got to keep the vegetarians and reducitarians, the flexitarians on board, and so therefore they've got to be very kind of picky about the language they use.
Yeah. I mean, do you think part of it also, I suppose, why quite a lot of these, especially what you're talking about, the sort of careerist activists, think a big part of the reason that they don't really talk too much about the philosophy and the rights and all that sort of stuff is because they'd have to take capitalism into consideration.
Yeah, there is that, but also they don't want to present anything difficult for anybody.
Yeah.
So the easier it is, I mean, basically they're kind of saying, give me money and these are the reasons why. Well, if you've got that kind of situation on the hand, it's kind of, well, keep the reasons as simple as possible.
Yeah.
You know, we're all against cruelty, so do it for that. You know, and
But
then
yeah, but even with that word, I mean, do you ever see videos about, say, vivisection, where even if they want to talk about it from a welfare point of view, I'm not really sure how you do that, but that still doesn't happen. We still revert back to factory farming.
Can you say that again? I'm not quite sure I followed that one.
So okay, so let's just take that Ed, for example. All of the videos that he's made, even Land of Hope and Glory, we're talking about factory farming. We're not just talking about welfare. We're talking about the welfare.
You were talking about the animals film being the exception, weren't you?
Yeah, it really is. Like, even those films, Earthlings and stuff, if they mention animal testing or animal use aside from food consumption, it's bare minimum. So not only is it very welfareistic, it's very speciesist within the welfareistic elements.
Yeah.
All we've done
still
really
there?
is add
Are you
cows,
still there,
pigs,
Ronnie?
sheep, chickens, turkeys to the list of cats and dogs. Basically, that's how a lot of those films push.
Yeah, Ronnie, are you still there?
I am still here. Yes.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting because Andy was pointing out that the Animals film, which came out in 1981, is a really kind of overarching kind of vegan, animal rights, animal liberation kind of film, whereas everything since then is kind of focused on the kind of food or the animal, the meat industry or whatever to call it. And so I hadn't really noticed that until Andy pointed it out, and it's true, that film, although it's very dated, is really kind of like an animal liberation.
Yeah, I mean, that was the other part I was about to say. The other key difference that I think that the Animals film does that I've never seen in any other film. So, like, let's say when you get to the end of Earthlings, it's like, what can you do about this? You can stop eating animals, basically. Whereas the end of the Animals film, I can totally see why Channel 4 wanted to edit that bit out, because it's like, fuck yeah, let's go and do something.
Yeah.
Like that is the end, isn't it? You've got you've got the Alf storming the place, you've got the protest, you've got the chants, and then you've got that bit of it's like, that's how it ends. It ends with,
you got the now bit at the end. But I mean, that's where you got that interesting review from Australia, which was kind of, go for it. I mean, we've just seen what the problem is, and we've just seen who are kind of fighting it. So go for it, man. That kind of thing.
Yeah, and I think especially like where it documents them kind of walking in, jumping over the gate. It kind of shows how easy. I mean, obviously it's a sign of the times. Things are different now with cameras and all that sort of stuff. But like, it also just showed how easy it was to go and do something. Even that little bit where, like, with Ronnie's, one of the guys says, like, we can do leafleting, but actually you realise that I could go and do something. Like, that's the kind of feeling that the film gives you. Whereas the ones now, even they're not just talking about what happens in the food industry. That's the kind of encouragement to go and make the change.
Do you not think that when, like, in 1981, you didn't have as many exposés, and if you did have an exposé, unless it hit the actual television, no one would see it. You didn't have the research, you didn't have the studies, you didn't have the information that we have now around environment or health. So the only thing that you had to argue back with people was the rights violations. You didn't necessarily, because people wouldn't make a connection to the cruelty because they couldn't see it. And if they did see it, it was once at 10 o'clock on Channel 4. They didn't make a connection to the environmental argument because I mean, correct us if I'm wrong, I don't think it was probably there. And if it was, it wasn't as strong.
It's only really mentioned in terms of, like, slurry, as far as I can remember. Yeah.
I'm just like, the arguments that vegans give back or get given to them, they've got to give back to. Those arguments wouldn't have been there because people wouldn't have known that it was better for the environment or worse for the environment. They wouldn't have known that it was better for your health or worse for your health. They wouldn't have seen the cruelty. So as an activist, you had two options: talk about the rights or and what else would you talk about back then? Because you wouldn't have had the other information that we normally have deflected upon us now. So that's probably why the animals film focuses on rights of animals, because we didn't have all this other information. We didn't have the video footage of the inside of factory farms or farms that we have now. And if we did, it wasn't easy to distribute compared to what it is now. We didn't have the internet back then. It would have had to go on national television for people to see it. And then how do you do that in a world that's fighting against it?
Well, there was a lot more information going on in terms of books and magazines and newspapers in those days, I suppose.
Yeah. Well, but I suppose taking that point into consideration, I mean, absolutely. Like, I mean, everyone's got a decent camera now in their pocket for the most part. So, like, footage is kind of all over the place. But we still don't get for the most part. I mean, even look at like vivisection to kind of footage or whatever that comes out. It's about beagles. We're not getting. I mean, you look at the in-depth coverage that's in the animals film in '81, and we're not just talking about what happens in labs. They've got animals that are tested by like nuclear contamination, radiation. All these other things are considered. I mean, and a big focus same on hunting, and that just isn't covered these days. But those things are probably more prevalent now than they were then. But yet they've been sort of like brushed under the carpet because factory farming happens. Even though that, I mean, obviously it wasn't to the same extent, but it was happening then too. But they realised that it was only a part of the problem, not the problem.
Yeah, somebody's asking about Speciesism, the movie. Is that an updated animals film, do you think?
I've not seen Speciesism, the movie.
No, Ian Runs on Plants is asking.
Where's that on, Ian? Is that a YouTube thing? I don't think I've come across that one. On speciesismthemovie.com. I'll have to look at it. I don't think I've watched that.
Yeah, I've not seen that one.
When was that out?
Well, Killeen is saying just found it on speciesismthemovie.com.
Yeah, look. That's not one I'm aware of.
Right.
It's a 2013 film. Okay. So 11.
10 years ago.
10 years, yeah.
The irony, isn't it? Because, like, obviously...
Well, it's a decent name for a starter.
Yeah. But I was going to say the problem with the animals film is it looks dated. Yes. I mean, like, even a 10-year-old film, a lot of people would think is dated, wouldn't they?
Yeah, that I suppose that is part of the problem. But also these days, there's quite an interest in things that are like vintage and retro, which it also has that feel. But there's so many very clever little bits of the animals film. Even like the start where it actually introduces like the title where it's got the kids' drawings. I just thought that was really effective. Just little things like that. You know, I just think it's a really, really well made film.
And I suppose the thing is now is a film that was made in 2013 isn't going to look as dated to what we have now compared to, say, if you watched a film from 1981 and 1991. I can remember when I was a kid watching films from the 80s that looked ancient versus now, if I watched a film from 2013. Well, like Avatar, I suppose, probably a good example. It's about 9-year-old now. It still looks current. It still looks new. Whereas back in the 90s, a decade-old film would look grainy and old and ancient. So I suppose, like, you've got like the animals that look even older now, I suppose, compared to that 2013 Speciesism film. Probably still looks quite current.
Yeah, I've not seen it to know what what's in it, so to speak. Could just be talking.
Well, apparently Gary Francione's in it.
Oh, okay.
Kerry said, I might watch Dominion again tonight. So can we think of anything other than Dominion for her to watch? I would suggest a bit of Reagan myself.
She's already watched. Yeah. She should watch. What's it, the John Adams one? She hasn't watched that. She's watched The Case for a couple of times. I know for sure. I'm trying to think of stuff I know she's watched from some of the lives.
And to be fair, if she's watched something like Dominion or Land of Hope and Glory or Earthlings, then the shock factor is not going to kick in, is it? I suppose. And it's making a connection with the rights of animals.
I was going to say, yeah, she actually, in fairness to Kerry, she knows Reagan to the point that a video that I posted a few weeks ago where you didn't see him, it was just his voice. She actually commented and said, "Is this Reagan?" And it was like, "Yep." Shame I can't spread that, throughout the vegan movement.
Yeah, kind of way ahead of most animal advocates.
Yeah, but absolutely credit where credit's due. Yep. Yeah. Oh, yeah. She watched Count at My Table. Yeah, that's one of the things she watched in its entirety. Because I would argue, I'm not sure what year that's from, but I would argue that's more dated, or certainly what seems more dated. But I'm not sure what year that's from.
Which one you're talking about?
Count at My Table.
Oh, 1998, I think.
Yeah, well, I would argue that, or maybe it's just the footage that's been uploaded to YouTube, but that film seems more dated than the Animals film to me, considering it's over 10 years.
Yeah, well, you see, the Animals film was groundbreaking in the sense that all the kind of like Michael Moore type vox pops and all that kind of stuff, and also presenting it in the theatre as well, of course, a cinema thing. That was all new. That was groundbreaking from the Animals film. So you had it all broken up with little bits of weird kind of Felix, kind of the cat cartoons, but then you had all these people talking, talking heads and this kind of stuff. Now, we're used to seeing that on documentaries now, but that was new in those days.
Yeah, true.
Because Schoenfeld, the director, was quite upset because, well, again, this is really ironic from an animal rights point of view, because he was upset because the reviewers and the people who wanted to talk to him about the film were concentrating on the content of it, whereas he wanted to concentrate on the groundbreaking parts and the kind of cinematography and this kind of stuff, right? And all that because he was like a technician. But of course, people were shocked out of their skin when they saw that film, and so they're bound to have wanted to talk about the content.
Yeah. Well, can you remember how the general public received it?
Well, we got permission to show a 16mm version of it at this place called the Blue Coats in Liverpool, and people were just generally shocked, and it was almost like, can this be real type of thing. But also, it was before the day when people used to dismiss anything they didn't like as fake, so it was, but it's almost like I can hardly believe this kind of thing, why didn't we know this before type stuff. And there was a huge increase in veganism because of that film.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, somebody on that panel today was saying, before this was saying that they went vegan overnight after watching the Animals film.
Yeah, I can imagine that, to be perfectly honest. That's why it's such a shame that most people have never heard of it, let alone watched it.
Yeah, well, I mean, to be fair, it does look dated. I mean, you've got to admit that it does look.
Yeah, of course, but so does Home Alone, and people watch that every Christmas.
Yeah.
Yeah. People. So is Alfred Hitchcock, but people watch that. So lots of stuff, but.
Well, I remember my kids when they were young, they wouldn't watch anything black and white, and they wouldn't watch anything which was kind of what you might call atmospheric. There was like a scene building up.
I mean, to be serious, I know that they've obviously remastered them and stuff, but how old is like 101 Dalmatians, Robin Hood, The Jungle Book?
They're cartoons, aren't they?
Yeah, but people still
watch like 1937 or something.
So, it's not necessarily the and obviously the information for the most part is out of date, but people are still watching stuff. I still think that, no one's moaned about the quality of the footage of the few little bits that I've posted in various places.
No, well, good. I mean, that's good.
I think my only worry really with it is just about the breach of copyright. To be perfectly honest, I'd love to stream it.
I reckon what it is, Andy, is that everybody just assumes you press the vintage filter on.
Well, this is what I mean, exactly that. Things like that these days are actually quite nichey and are well used all the time. I mean, a lot of the YouTubers that make sort of horror content use those kind of filters and the VHS filters on almost all their videos. It's standard. So it's not as like
people. It's really weird, isn't it? People actually include stuff like grain and glitches and that in there.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, even on some of my poems, I found that using that kind of like old-fashioned TV, and that's increased the views on a video that I used to spend days and days making. Yeah, absolutely. Sad but true.
Weird, isn't it?
Very. But it shows that people aren't put off by something that looks old, clearly.
No, I think, Andy, it just shows that people are fucking weird, if you ask me.
But yeah, obviously, I mean, I know it's quite graphic in parts, but I think people need to see various sections of that, to be perfectly honest. I mean, I think the next bit I'm going to post is, that old lady that said, well, animals chase one another, don't they? Yeah, it's not really the same. Don't chase them with horses and guns.
No, I just want to take a little brief moment just to Ronnie, are you still alive? Oh, he's just disappeared. I just said that.
Oh no.
That was so weird. I was in the middle of that sentence and he disappeared.
On that though, as well, when you were saying that obviously someone says that animals chase each other, they don't do it for fun, to be fair, do they? A lion doesn't chase a gazelle because it's feeling frisky. Or they're feeling frisky, sorry. Fucking still get me. So I'm trying to make a conscious effort to change the way that I speak when talking about animals, so that it's not as objectifying. Because in my mind, it's not. But when you've spoken,
no. But in terms of your substantive point there, Kevin, in terms of obligate carnivores, they're deadly serious about what they're doing because if they don't get a meal, they're going to be Jake for a while.
Yeah, but I mean, also, if a lion doesn't, so if a pride has just had a kill and they're well fed, and another herd of gazelle walks by, they won't just go and murder the gazelle. They'll let them pass because they don't need the meat at that point. They don't need the food at that point.
Yeah, or they might even rescue them if they're drowned.
Yeah. You see, I mean, one of the best times to sort of see those examples is quite often where there's been some sort of natural incident, whether it's a fire or an earthquake or stuff like that, and or even a drought. And when it's rained, and they all go and drink together, predator and prey alongside one another.
Even that was even in The Lion King, wasn't it? It's like the watering hole was like the safe space.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you see that a lot. That's one of those key times where you quite often will see literally.
Hey, Kevin, I can tell you're a dad if you're getting all your morals from the animals. The Lion King.
Well, I've noticed though, since we started talking about the Lion King in a far more positive light, like actually, you know what, Simba was more right space than you think, and people don't like using Circle of Life so much.
He was sympathetic. We've got Thomas Miller saying all you vegans are hypocrites, and Kerry has said yes and smiled to that. So can you elaborate on that, Thomas Miller? Why are we hypocrites?
Yeah, I think you've just seen just the most recent chat before Tammy's why Kerry has smiled to that. I think she's got ulterior motives there.
All right. I think we might know what's coming in terms of why.
I think I've got there's a possibility.
Kind of
death related, maybe.
Yeah,
I mean,
we can take bets on this one.
But first, before we even get that far, the accusation is vegans are hypocrites. So first of all, what we need is a vegan that's made the claim that they don't do this. Otherwise, we haven't got a claim of hypocrisy, have we? We've got someone acknowledging that there's a problem that we need to address, which is a bit of a difference, really. I don't know if you meant to. Oh, you did. Okay.
I think I must have clicked it by accident.
I was going to say, I didn't know that was an accident on that, so I just accepted it.
Yeah. Hi.
Hi, welcome anyway.
Oh, yeah.
But we're still waiting for Thomas to elaborate on this hypocrites claim. If there is an elaboration to come. Or whether that's just it. Vegans are hypocrites and you just have to accept it.
I was going to say something, but I remembered it wasn't bingo night.
What,
I
like
don't want to get.
charge your glasses or something?
Hey, welcome. Feel free to join us if you want. I hope Ronnie's okay. I can't see that he's rejoined. Maybe his phone died or something.
Maybe he's.
Yeah, he was quiet for a while. Maybe he'd fallen asleep. Maybe
Yeah, well,
bored
he
him to
he had
sleep.
live on pause, so he was probably doing something else on his phone.
Ah, okay.
He's probably listening. He was probably
it might
just.
have been a phone call or something.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a lab that needs setting fire to somewhere.
I'm going to go in a few minutes, mates, because I've been on the air now for 5 hours.
No worries.
Well, that's like only like half a shift, though. To be fair, Roger, put a full
Well,
shift in.
I know it's not much for you, but I'm getting on a bit now.
To be fair, it's I can imagine it being quite full on. To be fair, I didn't catch the Facebook Live earlier on, unfortunately. Andy posted it when I was putting the bairns to bed. So,
that's what I was going to ask. That live, will it be? Does that just get posted as like a video now?
I don't know. Did it not go out on Facebook Live? No.
I'm not 100% sure how Facebook works. To be fair, I don't. Really...
Yeah, it might be there as a recording, but it might have gone out there. In fact, some people were actually. Well, weren't you? Where were you commenting from?
Facebook.
Okay, so you must have been watching it on Facebook.
Yeah, I was watching it. In fact, that's what I mean. Will it get posted on that Spring page? As
well,
like
I think it just automatically becomes
brilliant.
recording.
I just want to read because I missed the first 20 minutes or so, but I
yeah.
caught the rest.
Right. Well, I don't know. I think it's one of those things where it goes out live and then it instantly becomes a recording, I think.
Okay, brilliant.
But don't quote me on that.
Well, if so, yeah, I mean, I would encourage people if you've got. I mean, what was it on for? About an hour and 50 minutes or so.
It was 2.5 hours.
2.5 hours. Okay, so I missed 40 minutes then because I watched about an hour and 50 minutes. But yeah, if you've got the time, I would encourage people to go and watch it.
Just a part timer, really, Andy.
I was still listening.
I think
it's great to have. I mean, how many people were on it? Grand total was it 6 or 7? I mean, and what 10, was it? The average, the minimum was 25 years.
There was 10.
10. Wow.
Yeah, so it went from 25 years to 80 years.
80, yeah, 80 when I joined.
I can imagine your lives are a little bit more full on than vegan bingo. To be fair, Roger, as well.
Yeah, that could be true. Yeah.
Yeah, they're a little bit more informative than vegan bingo.
Yeah, slightly more intellectual.
Just a touch.
Joe's saying enjoy your cuppa. So what has Ronnie signed in saying? I'm having a cup of tea.
Oh, okay.
Oh yeah. Had to answer.
Phone call. Yeah, I won.
Yeah, need to get a cup of tea. And another bloody part timer. I don't know.
No, as long as he's all right, that's the main thing.
Yeah.
I always worry when people randomly drop off that something's happened.
Well, if I have to make a serious point, which obviously I do because it's my job. People talk about full-time activism and stuff nowadays, and I'm telling you now, you wouldn't believe the amount of hours that somebody like Ronnie Lee put in. Or as a mate of mine in Liverpool called Dave Callender, and I remember because we shared a kind of joint house with him and everything. In fact, we had like 3 houses in a row. It's really brilliant because the letting agency only knew about the one of the houses of the 3, and it was £5 a month rent, and
wow.
the other two houses were free, right? And one of them became a stable for a cow who escaped from a local abattoir. But that's another story. What was I saying? What was I saying?
Ronnie and time put in.
Yeah. So Dave Callender, I remember him time and time again because he was on the HSA Hunt Saboteurs, that is, committee. He'd be there typing his reports at 4 a.m. in the morning. I mean, like full-time activism back in the 1980s really was full-time. I mean, like you would get up and start doing stuff until you were too tired, and then you'd go to bed, and then somebody would wake you up in the middle of the night because they wanted you to go on a bleeding raid or something. And so, I mean, it was really, really a different world back then, you know. And so it's a little bit like, you know, I've said before, Andy, that it brings it to my generation. It brings a smile when people who hold laptops in the street are called militants, kind of thing.
Yeah,
and it brings a bit of a smile when people call themselves, you know, full-time activists. You know, but they kind of almost like mean 9 to 5 or something. You know, it wasn't like that back in the day.
Yeah,
No.
yeah.
And I suppose
No,
those
I
of us
think
who
that's it,
aren't
isn't it?
full-time activists, we're trying to fit that in between around the 9 to 5 as well. So it's like, I mean, I'm not as active as I'd like to be, but that's because I've got a full-time job with 2 young children. As they grow up, I will become more active. And the ultimate goal is to reduce the amount of hours that I work, in time, obviously, to be able to do more for animal rights.
Yeah, well, I mean, the way it used to work in the 70s and 80s was the fact that you used to just essentially be long-term unemployed, but it was helped by the government in those days, in the sense that I was made redundant by the first recession that was created by Margaret Thatcher. Now, Margaret Thatcher was this kind of neoliberal kind of person, and she abided by this idea that if you create an amount of unemployment, and in Britain it got to about 3 million people, that they act as a reserve army of labour. So that means that everybody in jobs, especially the ones that are in the, you know, the lowest status jobs, they're always threatened by the reserve army of labour. So if they strike or they ask for more pay or anything like that, they can just simply be fired, right? And then another trick that Thatcher brought into being at the time was they started to sell people their own council houses. And so this idea of owning your own house is a big deal. And loads of people kind of fell for it. And that meant then that in industrial action, if you went on strike, you suddenly had a mortgage problem and that you were in danger of being evicted. Whereas when you were a council tenant, they didn't evict you, so you could go on strike then and fight against the government. So Thatcher was actually brilliant as a tactician. She sold people their council houses, and she made a lot of people unemployed to act as this reserve army of labour, which meant that the people in the lowest paid jobs were insecure because they knew they could be fired at any moment and be replaced at any moment. It was a real kind of masterstroke from Thatcher, you know.
Yeah.
And I was caught up in the first Thatcher recession. This in 1979, and so we just went long-term unemployed. Both Ronnie and I went long-term unemployed. A lot of people, activists, went on to kind of disability benefit and everything. And essentially, it meant then that the government were paying you to be activists. And the benefit of that from having a real job, a proper job, is the fact that you weren't paying taxes, except for VAT, which meant that you weren't funding, you know, animal agriculture and vivisection and stuff. So, but you can't do that nowadays. You know, long-term unemployment is not a thing anymore. So that's why everything's changed.
Yeah. I've managed to find this species in the movie, but it seems that you have to pay to rent it.
Pay in the 21st century? What's the matter with them?
Yeah. But looking at this trailer, it's got Tom Reagan in it. Obviously not in it, but clips of him because it looks like it's in the trailer. Yeah. But yeah, I can't find it anywhere available free to watch. It seems that you can only rent or buy it.
Can you tell where the Reagan clips are from?
It doesn't look like he looks like he's sat outside on a wooden chair. He's wearing a brown jacket, but I don't recognise it now.
All right.
But what year was it filmed? 2013, did Graham say? So potentially he.
Well, that was when it was out, I think.
Yeah, so I suppose he could have been in it. He could have actually been in it.
Yeah, right. He died in 2017, didn't he?
Mm. So it took 2 years to film, say. That would have been 2011. Yeah, it's possible.
Although there are some, you've probably seen these by now, Andy, but there are some really sad interviews
When he's a bit older, yeah, there's a couple,
Yeah.
yeah, mate. Especially ones where you can see it's kind of like someone set up like a Skype call or something for him. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and there's one where somebody's actually talking for him most of the time.
I've seen that one as well. Yeah.
It's so sad to watch that one.
Yeah. Well, although I actually like the interview because I like the things he says. It's sad to watch that. I can't think who the guy that interviews him, but it's like a video cast and he answers questions, but he's just so slow with his speech, and it's very sad.
Oh well, it comes to us all.
But yeah, absolutely, and it just showed, the passion and determination to just keep speaking all the way on.
Yeah, Colleen saying he was very sick. He was indeed. And it was one of those things. I think Reagan's illness was one of those kind of degenerative things that happen over quite a long time. So it's not as though it was kind of banging you out. It was kind of like there's a slow deterioration,
Yeah.
And that must be like one of the worst things, really, in a way, isn't it? I mean, like you'd rather just be full on and then out like a flame kind of thing.
Yeah. It's just such a shame. And it's such a shame that even now, so many still don't know who he is.
Oh, I know, yeah. Have we been told why we're hypocrites yet, by the way?
Still waiting. I'm assuming in the, I don't know, making sure it's the most concise sentence they can, or...
Ooh, Saki.
Yeah, I mean, unless I've missed it, let me just scroll up. We might have been defeated. We might as well end. Where are we? No, it just looks like there's some harmless flirting going on. It doesn't actually look like we got an answer.
Yeah, I think him and Kerry are just talking about tractors.
Oh yeah, they want to meet on some other platform to.
Yeah, just looking at this trailer, obviously I've got it muted, but yeah, so it looks like a clip I've not seen of Reagan before, but just before Reagan, there's a clip of Peter Singer. But I can't hear what's being said. So. Oh, Steve Best's in it as well. Okay, maybe it's worth renting.
Well, Steve Best and Reagan kind of went on a kind of lecture tour together,
I didn't know that. Is there any video of
that? Well, I went to one of them in Dublin, which was pretty interesting. In fact, Steve Best's talk was better than Reagan's.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Well, at the point, really, by the time you get to Reagan and Empty Cages, he's really just regurgitating at that stage.
Yeah.
And there's not really much that's fresh. And also, he's kind of defeated by then.
Right, so, I'm with you, yeah.
Yeah, and so he does... I mean, there's a page in Empty Cages where he kind of almost like lists a bunch of kind of great welfare kind of campaigns and stuff. And this is what completely upset Francione. I'm not sure if Francione took into account Reagan's age or something, but he was absolutely disgusted with Reagan for kind of capitulating.
Yeah.
And I think that was the product of a different personality. Reagan was kind of collaborative and a kind of caring personality. And obviously we know that Francione has got a bit of a harder edge to him, if you like.
Yeah. There's not a lot of ruthlessness about Reagan, really, is there?
No, that's right. And so he did get kind of battered into submission by the welfarists,
Yeah. Which I suppose is still happening.
Temple Grandin is also in it, right in it.
Oh.
Yeah,
oh, great.
Actually, I've got a couple of books by Temple Grandin, which are quite interesting on the autistic angle of things. Because, of course, she used to argue that because she was autistic, she could understand other animals more than most, which is why she did things like she got on her hands and knees and she crawled through slaughterhouses and stuff to try to experience what the other animals would experience.
It just seems so paradoxical. I've got a better understanding of the animals. Let me work out more efficient ways to kill them. I just, for me, it just that makes no sense.
No, that's right. Well, it's the welfarist point of view, isn't it? Because that's
Yeah.
unfortunate. If we keep going down a welfare route, then unfortunately that's the way that it will go, and it has gone, and it will continue to go.
Well, it's kind of like, I suppose it's a bit like, I don't know if it was our first live or not, but when we had that discussion about the animal communicator, it's kind of like we've got someone with this exceptional gift and it's been used to go, don't worry, they're fine with it. It's all good.
Yeah. And it's the it's the whole argument about why if you lead your entire conversation on cruelty and mistreatment, it literally opens you up completely to someone to go, okay, how do we mitigate that? Well, no, not how do we mitigate that. It's how do we eradicate that. It's like,
absolutely. Yeah.
But again, even if you were to say, how do we eradicate all cruelty and mistreatment, it still wouldn't make people think, well, how do we stop the use? It would just make them think, how do we improve the process?
Yeah, well, here's an interesting one for you, Kev. In the sense that I've known vegans have a similar attitude towards Grandin, which is that not that how can we defeat use? It's kind of like we can't defeat it, and therefore, what can we do instead? And that's why they all then slide into welfare. And so I've had vegans saying to me, look, there'll never be a vegan world. We'll never end animal use. The only thing we can do is get involved with welfare. And the reason that animal rights people should get involved with welfare is that the welfarists are crap at it.
Yeah.
And in some senses, that's what Grandin's attitude is.
I also agree that there's going to be people, even in a vegan world, you're going to have a black market probably for animal flesh.
Oh, yeah. So
it's like, if the argument was you're never going to eradicate it, so improve it, I suppose the way I would look at that is go, well, if you talk about improving how we develop flesh for people to consume, would we not argue that we should be getting behind the lab-grown meat argument? Because, like, I suppose if you could create something that had no exploitation, no rights violations, no harm, and was grown in a lab, then in theory, I suppose it would be, if you had that.
Yeah, there's a kind of solution, isn't it?
Yeah, if it was that, or cut someone's throat, would you choose the inanimate object that is grown in a lab to get the same result?
The weird thing is, right, is that I had a conversation with somebody about a week ago, 6-7 days ago, and because you don't know what a week is, and and this guy came up with this weird statement, which is, well, I want to eat meat, but I don't want to kill anyone, or something like that. And so I said, well, in that case, lab meat will be perfect for you. Oh, no, that's not natural and all that kind. So you end up with somebody saying something which is fairly kind of rational. You respond rationally, and then they come out with all this crap then, pointing out the fact that their first position wasn't even genuine.
Yeah. And there's a reason why mock meat is such a big business, and it's not for health, and it's not for environment. It's because when you think, so we become accustomed to tastes and textures through our life, and I suppose that's one of the reasons why certain cultures eat different kinds of foods, and not necessarily animal products, but just different kinds of foods.
Yeah, absolutely.
Different textures, different tastes. So because of that, when we brought up on an omnivorous diet, we go vegan, we might still appreciate the taste and texture of familiar foods. So that's why burgers and sausages and minced meats and all these other plant-based alternatives, and milk especially, I suppose the best example, are there, because people still want to put a white, creamy flavored substance in their cup of tea. People might still want to put something that mimics a burger in between two slices of bread. So it's like, I suppose it's the evolution almost of that. If we can do it, because I don't still fully believe we can do it without.
Yeah, the thing is about that though, Kev, is the fact that people will automatically assume that the new thing is inferior for some reason, without any kind of evidence whatsoever. And even then you say, okay, well, let's look at this morally. Say, for example, it was 10 or 12% inferior objectively. Wouldn't your morals kind of like fill in that gap and go, okay, well, that'll do then? But it's kind of like, no, that difference is enough to justify the rights violations.
Yeah. I suppose it's the reason why people go, well, I mean, the argument at the minute is your vegan food is full of processed chemicals that's causing God knows what. It's like, could you imagine if actually they were using synthesized meat made that's being fed with synthesized essential amino acids that's grown in a petri dish? Like that literally is like something that's full of God knows what, versus something that's full of protein isolates and gluten and actual just plant product that's been refined to its base elements and then separated to be more efficient.
Yeah, people don't make sense on that one.
I suppose the other factor you've got to take into consideration that goes against, say, lab grown meat versus the flesh of animals is when you take into consideration religions, especially like fundamental Christians, they oppose science like in pretty much every way possible. So them all of a sudden accepting the idea of this being grown in a lab somewhere is something that that goes against so many cultural beliefs that you've got to get through that are completely different from diet or just food related.
Yeah, it's such a rational thing, isn't it? Kind of in the sense that all the terrible things that go on in farms, you can eliminate all those, but oh no, it's in a factory, so that makes it even worse.
Yeah,
it's really weird. Uncle Louis' Kitchen said, Roger, where are you based? You mentioned Dublin a lot. Yeah, I'm based in Dublin, being the reason.
That Uncle Lou's not a million miles away from you, Rog.
Oh right, we're neighbours, are we?
I think so. Yeah, I mean, obviously Dublin's a fairly big place, but yeah.
Yeah, he's fairly local to Dublin. Yeah.
All right, very good.
I think through conversations I've seen him have with Graham, I think he's interested in becoming a bit more active in outreach and whatnot as well, possibly.
Oh yeah, well we've got that all in play. It's just that one of the people who organise it broke his finger, so it's been put back a couple of weeks. That's all. That's the reason I was out at the sanctuary the other day, because I had to lug a lot of. We had about €600 worth of corn and seeds. We had to lug it all over the place because it has to be taken to the various places where the other animals are, of course.
Yeah, did you put a picture of that on your community feed on YouTube or something?
I did, yeah.
Yeah, I thought I saw something. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's the back and the side of Neville. The Neville is the VIP van, and so we ended up with about €600 worth of food. And I asked Declan, I said, "How long is this going to last?" And he said, just over 2 weeks. Oh, geez.
That's expensive job, isn't it? Really, when you think about it.
Well, when you've got 100 mouths to feed every day, and also because Declan's such a softie, he feeds a little colony of partridges who have kind of escaped from the shooting fraternity, and he also feeds loads and loads and loads of crows and stuff.
Yeah.
And they kind of nest in all the big trees around the sanctuary, which are it's great to see. All the birds kind of chattering to each other and that and everything. And then in the morning they come down for their breakfast and all this kind of stuff.
On that note, is there anything that you can say on here that can potentially help with those costs?
What you mean, like donations? You mean?
Yeah. How can people potentially? Because I mean, that is a lot of money, and obviously 2 weeks isn't a very long amount of time. Just there's 26 of them in the year.
Yeah, you can go to Back Into Daylight Facebook page, and it's probably going to have links to where you can donate and stuff. And I think in recent years, Declan's got a little bit more organised in terms of. First of all, it's become a full-blown kind of charity, but also I think they've got Patreon and bank accounts and all that. Those kind of things are a bit more difficult in Ireland to set up than other places.
Right.
But I think it's all in place now. So yeah, maybe I think they've got an Instagram account. I'm not sure if they're on Twitter, but they're on Facebook. I know that.
Okay.
Yeah, Graham's saying 600 residents.
Yeah, because I know Graham and George. Any like donation stroke coins, gifts that they get on here, they all go there. But obviously TikTok take whatever it is, 60% of that before it goes there. So you're far better off donating directly.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think one of the reasons why we're keen on going back to the street is the fact that the way it used to work is we used to have a joint VGO and VIP event. So that's Vegan Information Project, Vegan Education on the Go. And but also we used to do a lot of advertising for the sanctuary. So when I was selling my badges, for example, I would sell them for €1. And sometimes people would buy a couple of badges and they'd give me a £5, right?
Yeah.
So I would always then just transfer the 3 then to the sanctuary. And that's the way it used to work, you know?
Yeah, I'm with you. Yeah, I mean, one of the I don't know if he's got one set up or not, but an Amazon wish list is usually quite a good way for people to contribute to.
I think they might have that actually.
Yeah, those are always really good ways that because people feel like they've actually, they've made a purchase, they know where their money's been spent straight away.
Yeah, although there are a lot of progressives who will boycott Amazon because it's a dodgy company.
Of course, but I mean the problem that we've got here is PayPal are dodgy, TikTok are dodgy.
Yeah,
Facebook
what isn't?
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. So, like, if that's the attitude you're going to have, you can't give them money unless you're going to drive there and put it in an envelope and give it or whatever. That's the only way we're going to achieve this. And if you're somewhere else that's not in Ireland, then it's not doable. So you're gonna have to pick one of them, I'm afraid.
Yeah. Graham's saying that. I think he's saying that they've had donations of things like heat lamps or something.
Yeah, because that's the one thing that I did notice in the past when I've done these kind of things, and also just in dog rescue in general, that an Amazon wish list is normally quite successful because people will already be browsing the website, for example, and they'll just add it to their list. Or it's just the fact that there's that transparency, so I know exactly what I've brought. It's not just some money that's gone in a kitty somewhere, and people do seem to prefer that.
Is Anna Declan's wife? No, Sharon's Declan's partner. So, yeah, I mean, like, actually, over the years, Declan's had quite a few cars donated to them, and then he kind of like, because he's like a pretty good mechanic and everything. Yeah. And, so he kind of does them all up and sells them on and that kind of thing.
Oh, that's cool. Well, I mean, to be honest, although it wasn't so much cars, it was houses, but that's where a big part of the RSPCA's funds come. They've got some serious property.
Well, there's an interesting story because when I was on the committee of the BYV, this is 1982, we were getting legacies, and sometimes people would leave, property. But often what they would do is because they wanted to look after their kids, they would leave the BYV a quarter of a house. Right, and the other kids, the other 3 kids, the other quarters, as it were, and then there was this protracted kind of problem of getting the kids to agree to that because they were pissed off that any of the money was going to anything besides themselves, and so then they ended up going to court over it and everything, and so sometimes being left legacies like that can actually cause you more problems than the benefit you get.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I suppose there's lots of legal complications too, isn't there? But yeah, you are right. I could imagine that the vast majority of people, if they found out that a percentage of their inheritance was being left to a rescue or sanctuary or something like that, they'd be pretty pissed off.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's often arguments between siblings already without the complication of.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, true. True. Is Bunny rejoining us or?
Oh, he'll be in bye-bye land by now, I think.
I would imagine. Tea in bed.
Bye, I'll be jumping off shortly as well because
No, yeah, I'm not. I'm
getting something to
certainly
eat.
not going late tonight either. I'm already knackered. It's been a long day.
Yeah, let's give it another 2 minutes. Well, for me anyway, because
Yeah, that's fine. That's absolutely fine.
So
got that fast.
And hopefully, fingers crossed, we haven't violated TikTok's terms and conditions in any way, and I can download this and check it on YouTube because it's been
as if we would TikTok.
I know, right?
We would
Well, that's
violate.
why I couldn't understand what the violation was in that conversation with James. So I'm glad that I won my appeal.
Yeah, well,
there's no rhyme or reason, is there?
Yeah, it's not Friday night, so I would usually probably violate all of TikTok's rules and regulations on a Friday night.
You know the silly thing, Kev? I had a look right through because obviously I use my other account when we go bingo. I had a look through when I was at the live center earlier. I think there's only been out of 6 bingos that we've done now. I think there's only 1 that I can't download, so all the others are fine.
Yeah, well, Kevin, you're letting yourself down there, mate.
Well, it just shows you how inconsistent TikTok is. That on this one, on our show on a Saturday, the one where we talked about creativity with Tim and a couple of others about poetry and that sort of stuff, that one's banned, and I lost my appeal. And don't know why, absolutely no reason. And then obviously the one from the week before last that we had with this James guy, that one was banned until I won my appeal. So I mean, there's no consistency whatsoever.
Maybe TikTok doesn't like creativity and free thinkers because it means that they'll actually create their own content instead of using their absolute
It's absolutely baffling though, because our Friday night lives, anything they're a bit wild, and after about midnight, sort of anything can get said for the most part. Whereas these ones are always tame, they're always educational, they're always polite. Yeah, crazy.
Yeah, I mean, not this week just gone, but last week's was. I for one was in. Yeah, filter was removed
no
completely.
terms violated according to TikTok, so you're all good.
Oh, Thomas is back. Just be normal and eat meat.
Oh, okay. Have you done your research before we go?
Is this how we're hypocrites? Is it because we don't be normal?
We're not normal. Well, you know the saying, Thomas, normal is violent.
Very.
Who wants to be normal, for God's sake?
Thomas wants to be normal. He wants to be a sheep.
Ooh, Kevin.
My counter to that isn't not just the animal euphemism, but the actual sheep. They're driven by the fear of the dog or the shepherd, right? People are worse than that. People police each other. So
it's like the lemming thing is a myth, isn't it? The lemming thing.
Yeah, like the whole kind of, I mean, the sheep are driven by the fear of the dog or the fear of the shepherd or whatever. There's a reason that they kind of are doing these one thing. Whereas humans don't do that. They do it themselves. It's their own insecurities for the most part that police them.
Yeah, except it's really interesting, right? Is that, we talked about instinct before. Other animals are just a bunch of instincts, whereas we're rational and we think things out and all that. You let off a sound like an explosion in a crowd of people, and they react the same over and over and over again. And again, it's kind of, that's instinct, right?
Yeah. Well, like fight or flight, right? I mean, that's instinct.
And I mean, there's a great thing on YouTube. What's it called? Stimulus response. It's called. You check out that on YouTube. It's really interesting. I mean, I think Peter did a version of it, but there was a proper version beforehand. It was called Stimulus Response, and it was about the things that we do involuntary, like withdraw our hand from, if we place it on a hot plate or something. And then there's other things that we do, which is, like just a response because we worked it out. And they did a lot of experiments on other animals, but they weren't invasive ones. They were more like putting chickens through an obstacle course and stuff. It's really, really a fascinating documentary.
Well, yeah, I'll check that. I'll just write that down, so I'll give that a watch in a minute.
Yeah, it's good.
Well,
I mean, it's not a vegan thing, but it's
no. I understand. Well, I don't think Thomas has come back with anything, so I think we're on a good point as any to end it there.
Yeah.
Well, Thomas, you haven't defeated veganism, so we'll be back.
Well, we can give Thomas another week to come up with.
Yeah, you've got a week. We'll be back next Saturday. Hopefully, you can prepare something.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd recommend stay away from the Friday show, Thomas.
Yeah.
It'll get banned anyway.
Yeah.
Right. On that note, thank you everyone. Thank you guys for joining us as always, and enjoy your evenings or your afternoons or your mornings.
Yeah,
or
thanks
wherever
for
you
your
are.
company, Andy and Kev and Ronnie, if he's still around.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ronnie.
Thanks
if
to
you
everybody
are-
who's commented. Thanks for Joe for doing the moderation. And
Yes, thank you everyone, and we will see you next week here at 8 o'clock. Thank you. See you later.
Yeah, thanks, guys. See you later.
same